Chapter 71. Winter Survival 4. Oren, cloaked in the full embrace of winter, was filled with skeletal branches, now stark against the freezing air. While the occasional evergreen spared the landscape from total barrenness, it was the blinding snowfields that predominantly caught one's eye. Sweeping the snow from a flat rock mid-mountain, Anise and I settled upon it once we were sure of its dryness. It's not a grand mountain, but a mountain nonetheless. Some areas are deceptively dangerous, and with the season being what it is, slipping in the snow could seriously injure a student. We must stay vigilant while supervising, right? Anise unfurled her tied-up chestnut hair, complaining of the chill at her neck since entering the mountains. The waves in her shoulder-length tresses bounced lightly, releasing a subtle fragrance of incense as she brushed them with her hands. Phew, it's tough, Ed, you don't look tired at all. It's about time for a break. Let's rest for a bit. Midway up Oren, we were alone. In this season, one would scarcely expect students to venture so high by their own volition. Apart from the chatter of birds and the crush of snow beneath our feet, there was complete silence, only a gentle wind occasionally unveiled grass buried under the snow without causing much of a disturbance. Thanks, Ed. You're so strong. It's all the more troubling that I'm causing delays because of me. You're also very understanding. Anise fiddled with her fingertips, bashfully averting her eyes. There, I must have had many misunderstandings about you. With a sheepish glance upwards, Anise quickly looked away again, as though embarrassed by her own words. Misunderstandings. You must know, to some extent. I'm very close with Yenica. I worried she might fall in with the wrong sort, and that made me colder to you. Thinking back, Anise's cold treatment wasn't particularly significant. Merely receiving cold looks or being avoided on occasion was all it amounted to. Considering my reputation was in ruins for the first semester, I understood the behavior. Nearly all the students avoided me, not just Anise. I was too preoccupied with my own survival to take much notice. It's okay. I didn't mind much. You had your reasons. I understand. With a casual dismissal, I glanced over the field trip checklist prepared by Assistant Professor Claire. We had to verify spots on the mid-slope suitable for placing magical equipment and to set up safety measures near any dangerous cliffs. It was a cumbersome task to check up to the altar at the summit, but if we hurried, we might finish before sunset. Returning to camp meant a litany of chores, so I wanted to complete the task swiftly. However, I couldn't drag Anise around when she was already low on stamina, and to avoid overexerting myself, frequent breaks weren't such a bad idea. Ed is more diligent and sincere than I thought. As she twirled the ends of her hair, Anise spoke meekly and met my gaze slowly. Having someone like Ed in the lab is such a relief. It's been hard managing the work alone. You know how Professor Claire can be, a promising scholar, yet lacking in some areas. That's true. You've had your share of troubles. I guess so, but it's okay. Anise beamed, lightly gripping my arm. Now that you're here, Ed. There's not much I've actually done yet. But you'll help from now on. Look, we're almost done with the site visit. Anise sprang up, maintaining her sidelong glances as she approached me. I'm thankful it's Ed who's here. Of course, the other two are a great help too, but having Ed is a real support for me. Quote ellipsis question mark quote. Ed, it may be painful to mention, but, after all, you were disowned by your family, weren't you? Expressions can be so varied. They may all be smiles, yet so different. The smile Anise now gave me seemed to indicate a lingering pain rather than cheerfulness. With a bittersweet smile, she nonchalantly rested her hands on her hips and bent slightly forward, as if wanting to see my reaction. It's not easy standing on your own in such a dazzling place as this. Her allure was subliminally different from flirtation. She seemed to evoke a mixture of maturity and relatability in someone of our age. Stepping closer and trailing her hand down my arm, she didn't lose the bittersweet smile as she continued. I sympathized. I managed on my own after my family's fortunes fell right when I joined the school. I wanted to keep attending, so I persevered alone. That must have been hard. Yes, it was tough. Anise looked away distantly, as if recalling the struggles of her solitary battles of the past. It felt like walking through a long, lonely winter. She certainly gave off an impression of resilience, whether in financial matters or others. She had clearly handled it all on her own. Maybe that's why I felt a kinship with you. You must have had a difficult time with academic life as well. And with all those rumors. It's not so bad once you get used to it. Don't be too disheartened. You've held up well yourself. Ah ha ha, thanks. We have quite a bit in common. At her sentimental disclosure, I offered my share of comforting and empathetic words. I was somewhat surprised by her demeanor. I had pegged her as more cold and pragmatic than this. Though we weren't close, this side of her felt new to me. People truly reveal themselves over time. Indeed, you have a strong spirit, Ed. I'm truly glad we've resolved our misunderstanding. Perhaps the sensitive conversation has affected me, I feel a little flush. Anise, once more busying her fingers, turned away hastily. Anyway, I'm embarrassed. Let's head to the summit, we've rested plenty. We should finish quickly, and do be careful. There are lots of loose stones around here. Before finishing her sentence, Anise had slipped, tumbling towards me and landing squarely in my arms. Ovoa. Anise let out a flustered yelp, pushed off my chest, and quickly extricated herself. Sorry, I tripped over a stone. Be careful. Looking down for the treacherous stone, I found nothing, just slippery snow. Anise began vigorously fanning herself, as anyone would in an embarrassing situation, while I patiently waited for her to regain composure. Just a moment, why am I so hot? I'll calm down shortly. Wait for me here, I'll be right back. She dashed behind a nearby bare tree, leaving me seated on the rock, exhaling deeply and watching my breath cloud the snowy scene before me. Oren seemed peacefully dressed in white, a starkly beautiful sight. It's tricky. Sitting on the exposed roots of a barren tree, Anise collected her thoughts. From the outside, he looks so upstanding, is it an act? Knowing that I'm Yenika's close friend. Puzzled, she stroked her chin and brooded. Clearly, my response hadn't been entirely convincing. I kept to my plan flawlessly. Appearing competent but with a slight vulnerability that suggested a need for care. A fellow soldier through a challenging academic career, an empathetic bond. Unsure whether she preferred a mature charm or youthful cuteness, I aimed for a mix, adding subtle touches of physical contact and culminating in the accidental embrace. Her confusion was apparent, but whether it stirred deeper feelings was unclear. I was tempted to observe more, but if she hadn't responded by now, it likely wasn't a sign of strong interest. Did I get too absorbed in it? In the earnestness to check, I ended up performing method acting. I ended up lamenting the harsh, winter-like academic life, so perhaps my true feelings had inadvertently mixed in a bit. What can I do? Paradoxically, the perfect lie is born when intermingled with a sliver of truth. It seems like it was an effective blow, so if a response comes, it will likely be soon. That, I didn't realize before, but you're in better shape than I thought. Anise, looking down at the palm that had just touched Ed's chest, opens and closes her hand again. It feels like the unexpectedly firm touch remains. Acting like a simpleton yet blessed with good stamina. I thought he was just an ignorant noble's son, but against expectations, he has decent workmanship. His appearance is not something I need to bother evaluating. Indeed, to a naive girl like Yenika who knows nothing of the world, she might completely fall for him, but Anise has background knowledge. After all, Ed is a descendant of the high-pressure Rothtaylor family, and the notoriety of the past doesn't just disappear overnight simply because things have calmed down. They say physiognomy is a science, so my doubts about Ed's behavior haven't vanished. This is how persuasive it can be to think that he's played women like this. To womanizers who change masks and discard women, such manipulation is as easy as eating cold porridge. If even Anise finds him a strangely ambiguous figure, it's only natural that an innocent girl like Yenika would fall completely for him. Yeah, that's how it is. Anise nods in acceptance and steadies her breath. A thick mask drapes over the surface of the skin. The renovated Ophelius mansion now looked far cleaner and more modern than before. Of course, there is no way Tanya, who has just set foot in Sylvania, would notice the difference. She could only admire it in comparison to the Rothtaylor mansion. It appeared nothing short of magnificent. When she had come to apply before, it was still under construction, so she hadn't imagined it would turn out this beautiful. The maids have organized the luggage you sent. It's the second room on the inside of the third floor. When the young lady of the continent's most powerful Rothtaler family arrived, it was natural for Bellmeyer, the highest authority of the Ophelius mansion, to pop out. Bellmeyer greeted Tanya politely and guided her as she gracefully nodded her head. Just complete the dormitory admission process through the servants. I have somewhere to stop by before that. Yes, I understand. Well-educated and stylish-looking attendants descended one by one from Tanya's grand carriage, dressed in antique clothing. Accompanied only by a minimum number of servants, Tanya turned her path towards the dormitory block. She's not the most energetic, but she enjoys walking, savoring the crisp winter air as she leisurely tours the campus. The professorial halls of Sylvania indeed brim with romance. This land of study, where the noble and talented refine themselves towards becoming shining talents, uplifted her mood as if she was already a part of its community. It gladdens me to heed your intentions, for as your father, I wholeheartedly support your ambition. The generous and dignified Duke of the Clarel Empire, Kreben Rothtaler. Before leaving the Rothtaler mansion, the final dialogue she had with her most respected father gave Tanya even more strength in her shoulders. Before heading to Sylvania for academics, Tanya had made 2 resolutions to her father. To become the youngest student council president in Sylvania, she pledged to elevate the family's honor, and to completely erase the yet unsettled shame of the Rothtaler family, the existence of Ed Rothtaler from this glorious land. This was Tanya's ambition, resolved solely for the glory of her eminent family. It seemed Kreben was deeply impressed. Tanya was immensely proud of that fact. Due to the tragedy of the mysterious death of her elder sister Arwen and her elder brother Ed's expulsion, she became the next head of the Rothtaler family by chance. She struggled to shake off the sense of unworthiness she felt for attaining a glory she wasn't meant to have. Now, as she's been accepted into Sylvania and feels recognized, Tanya feels her enthusiasm well up again. She was eager to take the new student placement test soon and have her capabilities acknowledged. She might have been the first of the new students to enter the dormitory. Considering the student council elections, there isn't much time. She wanted to meet as many important figures in the school as possible, stamp her presence, and recruit them to her side. Becoming the student council president in her first year, a feat never before achieved in Sylvania's history, was Tanya's primary goal. Within the academy, there are several big shots present. Convincing each student one by one is important, but if you want to become the student council president, it's crucial to enlist the key figures who drive public opinion as your allies. Kreben's golden advice. And his help. There are many big shots within the academy with whom I am acquainted. Since I have some business to take care of, why don't you, acting for me, make your presence known to them, and while proposing various ideas, expand your influence? Surely it will be a good experience. No, persevere, Tanya. Tanya was breathless even as she walked. Though she lived in the Rothtaler mansion and was raised as a precious gem, she rarely did anything on her own initiative. She was merely carried on the family's glory, without substantively doing anything for the family. This was her chance. Not only was she representing her father, but more importantly, it was about establishing Tanya Rothtaler's own position. That's all, Tanya concluded with a bright smile. Her ambition to become the student council president. Her resolve to completely restore her family's honor by erasing the likes of trash Ed Rothtaler. And what benefits she could offer when supported. What promises she could make. Having laid all that out, she smiled once more with dignified grace. As fresh as a newly bloomed rose, the eagerness of a new student was captivating. The big shot, sitting across the table from Tanya, remained quietly seated throughout. Anyway, the student council elections are a long way off, and there's a lot to do as a freshman before that, so this is merely a casual promise. Anyway, if you support me, I can actively reflect your opinions in the proposals for school regulations that even influence within the dormitory. Senior. Besides, someone like you, senior, would know far better than I what it means to have the student council president as an ally. Tanya naturally continued her speech, recalling Kreben's words. Sylvania will provide you with the utmost respect due to your status, but at the core, it's a land of academics. Even the princess herself accords teachers the respect they deserve as educators within the realm of study, so don't commit rudeness by relying on your noble status. Anyone higher in grade than you are considered a senior. Before status comes the year of study. Of course, the person in front of her would treat Tanya with respect according to her status, but she had no intention of being insolent. Tanya had already heard many rumors of Sylvania's brilliant seniors. She was now face to face with one of the big shots from those rumors. It's a matter beyond status. A matter of achievements and capabilities. Regardless of the lowliness of one's birth, the demonstrated ability cannot be scorned by anyone. And isn't it so that not even the most battle-hardened veterans bow in recognition? The figure opposite her had consumed many big shots, and grown big as a lion. Even the air of nobility they exude is indistinguishable from that of the aristocrats. Had it not been for the glory of Rothtailor, encountering such big shots directly would have been a tremendous honor unlikely to be afforded to her. Remember, when you meet the person I introduce you to, always treat your counterparty with due respect. Especially when it comes to negotiations and transactions, you cannot lightly regard them as someone you can't handle. She and we crossed paths concerning the business plan for the Sage's seals. There are still negotiation items pending, so try to handle the matter as my representative. It'll surely be a good experience. No, be strong, Tanya. Lortel Caheln, with sparkling eyes, watched the new student looking up at him. After listening to the end of the story, Lortel gently closed and reopened his eyes and wore a dignified smile in response. How interesting. Chapter 72, Surviving Winter 5. Lortel smiled faintly. He had heard rumors that there were many big shots among the new students this year, and he had roughly identified their backgrounds. If he looked at Tanya with a sidelong glance, she really resembled her brother quite a bit. The sharp eyes and bright blonde hair were dead giveaways. However, her demeanor was uniquely different from Ed's. The peculiar sense of livelihood and robustness that one felt from Ed Rothtailor seemed much subdued in her. Instead, it was replaced by the dignified comportment befitting a noble. One could sense her confidence but not arrogance. Perhaps this was the grace of a lady who had been cultured through the years. Though not particularly pleasant for Lortel, who had come up from the bottom, she was still Ed Rothtailor's sister, after all. There was nothing to be gained by showing animosity, even though all she talked about was chasing Ed away despite being all decked out for the occasion. Have you ever met that man, Senior Lortel? Yep, I have. His nonchalant speech was permissible due to being a grade higher. In the academic lands of Sylvania, even nobles must adhere to basic manners according to grade levels. It was almost like prostrating in respect, though one couldn't simply treat nobility poorly. Only figures like royalty or saints, akin to the heart of the continent, could transcend this principle. In that case, there's no need for a lengthy explanation. You must be well aware of what kind of man he is. I know, all right. An embarrassment to the Rothtailor family and a veritable thorn in the side. I've lived alongside that man since childhood, so I know very well. Full of pretense, and oblivious to any real grace, such a vulgar person. While he held the position of heir to the family head, just because of his age, I can't tell you how many times I lamented to the world. While sipping tea, Lortel quickly ran things through his head. The situation was somewhat unexpected and disconcerting, but it wasn't too complex when looked at objectively. The real issue was how to deal with it. Clearly, showing her the door was not a wise option. Still, I believed that the world has a way of righting itself and that man would eventually fall due to his vanity. While meekly playing the role of a well-behaved kinswoman before him, I was up all night studying behind his back, constantly advancing myself. That must have been tough. It's nothing compared to Senior Lortel, who rose from the very bottom. Anyway, such a person should not set foot in Sylvania. He could mar the esteemed reputation of the noble Sylvania Academy someday, and it's a disgrace for our Rothtailor family as well. One couldn't easily dismiss the young lady of the Rothtailor family. In the Academy of Sylvania, Lortel may be the senior, but in terms of social status, one can't take her lightly. Favored by Krebin and likely to seize power someday, isn't that potential great? Moreover, while Tanya harbors ill will towards Ed, there's no telling whether Ed regards Tanya as an enemy. Any harm to his sister could lead to a severe falling out on Ed's end. But it's a matter beyond emotional concerns. Connections are a more honest asset than gold. It broadens and deepens in direct proportion to the effort and time invested. And Tanya Rothtaylor is a rather exceptional asset. To Lortel, who views everything from a business perspective, there's no better investment. Therefore, the answer is to feign collaboration while currying favor with her. As long as any plans or conspiracies are kept from her, all will be fine. While that's the likely solution, the more I hear, the more I wonder how divine Telos could have allowed such a person to carry the Rothtaylor blood. Though he took up combat lessons from youth, he never achieved real success. Just a man puffed up with vanity, stuffed with flattery from his retainers, with no acknowledgement of his incompetence. He managed just a slight awakening in monosensitivity and acted as if he were some grand mage, and when he barely passed the entrance to Sylvania, it was quite a boast. Seeing him caught up in trouble and ending up like this in just a few years, frankly, it was quite a relief. Tanya's deep-seated resentment for Ed was unspeakable. Despite dedicating her life to upholding the name and decorum of the Rothtaylor, she lived beneath Ed, filled only with vanity without making any substantial contributions of her own. It was bearable until the eldest daughter, Arwen, was alive. At least Arwen was a role model in every aspect required of a Rothtaylor. Tanya lived hoping to reach even the soles of Arwen's feet. But once Arwen met an untimely death and the pitiable Ed inherited the position of heir, she was tormented by the unfairness of the world. How frustrating to entrust the future of the Rothtaylor to a man who couldn't even match the capacity of an average noble. I acted like a modest and obedient sister before him, but there's no need anymore. Now his true colors are revealed to the world. A man like that, full to the brim with vanity and pride, lacking any substance, you, Senior Lortel, would have seen right through him in an instant. So, then, yes. So, with this opportunity, she had been speaking enthusiastically when suddenly she was at a loss for words. Tanya had just realized the unnatural flow of the conversation. There was no exchange. Lortel had been responding only with short answers to her monologues. Was there some offense committed? She looked back at Lortel, but he remained smiling serenely. Her russet hair, neatly rolled back under a blue rose hairpin, fringed with occasional flashy frills, sat undisturbed. It seemed like a still image, yet the hair was actually gently swaying with gravity. No other expression but a smile. That is, why? Did I do something wrong? No. If it's personnel sent by Krebin to act on his behalf, there's a high chance they possess some potential or talent. He's not a man to make a fruitless investment led by sentiment. Without promise or, even utility, he wouldn't bother. Yet, in Lortel's eyes, no potential seemed apparent. Whatever talents Tanya might have had, they didn't seem to have blossomed. There may need to be a catalyst to properly gauge the worth of such a person, but actually, that's beside the point. No, it's just, you seemed angry, is it my mistake? Angry? What are you talking about? Lortel is known for never losing his reason even before the strangest variables and crises. Always making rational choices, he's a paradigm for traders. Tanya knew this too, as Krebin had warned her in advance. But, unfortunately for both Krebin and Tanya, they had overlooked one variable. Despite her decisive resume teeming with florid epithets, the actual owner of Elt Trading Company, the Golden Daughter, a devil who sold her soul for money, the leading merchant of salvation, they forget, she too is but a young girl of her age. There certainly is a critical weakness that must not be touched, despite her unfailing rationality in the face of all other variables. The bulging vein across her forehead proved that fact. By the way, are you done with your tea? As Lortel's mind turned cold, plans swiftly fell into place. Acquired tome, medium magic, focused explosion. Acquired tome, medium magic, wind of the origin. He crossed the camp, tucking a few magic tomes under his arm that he had secured from Professor Glast's library the night before. They weren't precious books. Anyone could borrow them from the student library, but it was nice not to worry about return deadlines. Thanks for today. Tomorrow there's just some simple paperwork. For the day after next, when we set up the exam site, come and help me one more time. Other than that, just make sure to assist well on the day of the exam. The day's student council scholarship work was coming to a conclusion. It felt more like Anise, than me, who did the hard work. Though it was bothersome to run around here and there, it wasn't as grueling compared to physical labor. The sun was setting. Such is winter. A moment of inattention, and darkness has settled in the sky. I considered retiring early to my cabin but decided to sit by the campfire instead. Blizzard winds typically made staying outside rather unbearable, but on a day like today, with the post-snow coziness lingering, sitting by a campfire was bearable. I habitually conjured mana and cast a fire spell towards the campfire. However, the flame didn't rise. Right now, I'm unable to use magic. I was looking forward to reading outside in the fresh air, but it's somewhat inconvenient without a fire to do so. I lifted my head to look around the camp, scanning tree branches, cabin roofs, flat rocks, but nothing caught my eye. After pondering briefly, I got up and headed towards the cabin. Upon opening the wood door of the now rather splendid cabin, the bulging blanket on the bed caught my sight. The creature that used to pop out of various spots in ways one couldn't imagine seemed to have become a bit predictable lately. Or maybe I've gotten used to the creature's antics. Hey, Lucy. When I pulled back the blanket, Lucy lay curled up asleep, perfectly at home, breathing softly. As I lifted her witch's hat, a tiny hand shot up and grabbed it tightly. Light a fire for me, will you? Lucy sat up groggily, tilting her head. I smoothly took out a piece of jerky from the jerky pouch and offered it to her, and she took it without hesitation. Then she raised both hands up high, signaling for me to pick her up. Since I'm at a loss, I don't complain. After all, Lucy weighs next to nothing, almost worryingly so. Upon stepping outside with Lucy towards the campfire, before I could say anything, a fire blazed up instantly. After a brief, thanks, I motioned to take her back inside the cabin, but Lucy quickly clung to my coat. I want to stay outside too. Sure. Since I can't use magic for the time being, I plan to rely on Lucy for various things. At least to get through this winter, her help was necessary. I went to a flat rock near the fire without any complaints, and Lucy hopped off first, cheerfully patting a spot next to her on the ground. I took my seat with the magic tomes, and Lucy buried her head in my lap, lying down casually with her arms stretched out. Whether she considered people as pillows or pillows as people was unclear. Having heard the sound of the campfire burning so often, it felt almost like my ears automatically filtered it out. Given the time, it was quite dark. The light from the campfire wasn't quite enough to read the tomes, making me furrow my brow. As I struggled to read in the dim light, a crackling flame softly floated beside my ear. The flames rise up, warm and providing a light perfect for reading. The caster of this flame magic slumps on my knee, staring blankly into space, resting. This one is unexpectedly delicate when it comes to such things. The winter forest, undisturbed by the wind, is especially quiet. The only sounds are the rustling of book pages and the crackling of the campfire. When the persistent cries of the insects have retreated, sitting quietly in the chilly air gives one the feeling that the entire world has come to a stop. I quietly turn the pages, reviewing the theories learned in our elemental studies class. While I have a grasp of the basics, mastering specific intermediate-level magic requires more in-depth knowledge. Since every student's target intermediate magic is different, covering everything in general lessons is not easy. Self-study is inevitably necessary to some extent. Though I can't use mana, and therefore cannot practice physically, if I at least become proficient in theory, by the time this vacation ends, I should be able to master intermediate magic as well. The intermediate magic I aim to learn are Point Explosion and Origins Wind. Based on my many leveling experiences, combining wind and fire magic significantly boosts combat efficiency. Once I've mastered intermediate magic, I can proudly say that I've had professional magic training. However, mastering just these two would be a good start. The smell of perfume. Lucy, who had been lying quietly, suddenly made an offhand remark. Is that so? It seems that the scent of Anissa's flowers has clung to me, likely from when she slipped on the mountain earlier today. Lucy sniffs at her sleeve, then sniffs near my chest again before pushing herself up with an elbow and tilting her head. Do you have a fever? Are you sick? Is it that obvious? Don't get sick. You could die. I currently have a slight fever, an after effect of using Professor Glast's ring. As I learned when I collapsed from overworking before, Lucy abhors someone close falling ill due to sickness. Likely due to a previous experience of loss. It's not a deadly illness, don't worry. If your mana is twisted, I can untangle it. She presses firmly on my chest to untangle any mana, but realizes immediately that something's off. It's not that my mana is twisted. There is simply no mana, it's been emptied. Lucy momentarily looks confused before nodding in understanding. You did something reckless. I can manage, somehow. Once winter ends, you'll probably become a lot stronger. Murmuring to herself, Lucy lies back down and sprawls out. There's plenty to do during the winter. While the forest wraps in the warmth after the snow now, harsh cold, heavy snowfall, and biting winds will surely hit our camp often. Our cabin needs reinforcing, and while I can find food, I need to personally ensure the camp's durability. Hey, can I ask a weird favor? A weird favor. Lucy flips her witch hat off and extends her silvery white hair towards me. Would you stroke my hair just once? I stare at her incredulously, and she quickly grabs my wrist and places my hand above her head. As I stroke her hair, Lucy slowly drifts into sleep, a nostalgic look on her face as if remembering something. It feels like something I've seen many times before. When the calm winter ends and spring arrives, it will be time to wake from hibernation. In a way, this winter is Lucy Mayriel's irreplaceable time of rest. 1. Organize workshop plans. Check 2. Build storage warehouse. 3. Extend cabin. 4. Check scenario. Check 5. Review scholarship responsibilities. Check 6. Raise magic engineering proficiency to the 3rd stage or higher. 7. Acquire advanced archery skills. 8. Master intermediate magic theory. Check 9. Contract a high-level spirit. Check. Ellipsis. After some time, I hear someone coming through the underbrush. It's Lortel, not in his usual dazzling attire, but in a simple semirobe with his hair tied to one side. I had heard that business at Eltie's firm was bustling due to the vacation season. I expected that the tasks related to the magical engineering supplies I requested might be delayed. Ah, Lortel, it's been a while. Senior Ed, I have something to discuss with you, and I'd like to ask about something too. About those previous requests. Just tell me to come over to Eltie's and I'll go there. Why go all the way to the camp? No, that's all right. Lortel hesitates, then falls into thought for a while, stroking his jaw with a finger, staring blankly at Lucy. Asterisk. That's bizarre. A guardian of the northern vegetation, raised and nurtured by the Island family. Spear of foliage, Zix Effelstein. One of the recommendations Lortel made for Tanya. Among the second-year seniors, aside from the genius magician Lucy, Zix was said to possess the upper echelons of magic power in the department. His intrinsic mana capacity might not be outstanding, and his pure magic firepower could be outclassed by other students of Class A, but in one-on-one combat, he was known for his distinct combat sense. Moreover, he was well liked and respected by most of his second-year peers. To win over the upcoming second years, Lortel advised that Zix must be recruited first. With no miracles expected on the first encounter, merely making an acquaintance was the goal. Indeed, advice befitting her. The place of meeting was at the entrance of the path leading to the Lortel Hall, the dormitory for honor students at the edge of the academic living complex. Zix's first impression was striking as he single-handedly carried several travel bags, each big enough to contain the upper half of a person. Behind him, Elka Islan, the librarian, struggled with a small bag. To an outsider, it seemed as though they were embarking on a large-scale migration. The story went a bit long, but thank you for listening until the end. The gist of it is quite simple. Smiling warmly and bowing politely, Tanya continued. If you assist me in getting even with that man, I will offer the greatest reward possible. This promise is backed by both the name of the Rothtaylor family and the official seal of Eltie's firm. The reward could take various forms. For example, the Island family is renowned for its prestigious archaeologists, right? I could offer access to numerous antique artifacts stored in the Rothtaylor family's vaults. Really? Oops. Elka Islan, Zix's partner, reacted to the words. Zix and Elka, apparently planning to return home during vacation, were sorting their belongings. Pausing to set down his burdens, Zix sat on one of the large wooden trunks while he observed. That's so. Pushing off his impromptu seat, Zix approached Tanya with deliberate strides, closing the distance. Though his solid build was not overly large, standing beside the comparatively petite Tanya made him seem significantly more imposing, prompting her to instinctively swallow nervously. His mana, flowing palpably, was unmistakable. Zix's cold gaze, looking down at Tanya, sent shivers down her spine. You are, Senior Ed's sister. Yes, hey. Her voice betrayed a nervous hitch. Tanya hurriedly suppressed it, but Zix, tense in the midst of the silence, allowed a cool, mocking laugh to escape. Ha ha, did you hear that, Elka? This is Senior Ed's little sister. The atmosphere was far from normal. By the time Tanya sensed it, the situation had already shifted. Without showing any further signs, Zix slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out a spherical object, a magical engineering device used by freshmen. A wave of tension hit Tanya the moment Zix placed the device into her hands. This is a basic magical engineering tool used in essential classes, but don't buy a new one, use this instead. It's a mana sensitivity trainer and it's already set up, so it'll be easy to use. Yes. Oh right, Elka. Did we pack up the notes from Professor Delroff's elemental studies class? Yeah, I've got them here. Was about to throw them away, believe it or not. Here, take all of these. There's a big difference in class with and without the outline. The absorption efficiency will change drastically with these notes. Look, it's all organized here. Take these too. Yes. Tanya scrambled to hold onto the stack of notebooks and documents. And this is the training manual for Professor Feld's class on mana efficiency. The important parts are marked, so it's better to use this than to buy a new one. This wand is for the Monstrology class. I've modified the search magic specifically for Mount Orin. It'll be convenient for you. Here, take it too. Ah, yes. And this. This is, you might not need it. Oh well, take it anyway. Dispose of it if it's not needed. Elka, did you find the headdress for Professor Holland's class? Here it is. And this is an annual membership card to Laplace Bakery in the Living Complex. It's really popular even among nobles who have to queue up. Since there's still time left in the winter break, you use this. Anyway, I'm going back to the family home. Here's the headdress too. Right, take this as well. Oh, you're out of hands. Servant, please take this. And these as well, they'll be of use. This necklace and headdress, here, I'll put it on for you. After a while of handing over an array of valuable tips and supplies for academic life, Zix and Elka wiped the sweat off their invigorated faces with a sense of accomplishment. Tanya simply stood there, swarmed by all the items, struck dumb. She braced herself, fearing the pile of luggage might collapse. You did hear my proposal correctly, right? Huh. Oh, something about doing something to Senior Ed, right, that's it. It's natural for siblings to have a rivalry. There's never any love lost between them. Well, it's not surprising, given Senior Ed's personality. It's easy to misunderstand. Zix. The ship's about to leave. We have to get the luggage to the docks now. Right, I got it. Elka. Anyway, you're Senior Ed's sister, right? Really nice to see your face. I'm Zix, going into second year, and I've had a certain relationship with Senior Ed. Zix began gathering the bags again. We owe each other a bit, having known each other for a while and all, it's that kind of special relationship. Nice to see you making the rounds early like this, showing promise just like your brother. You're bound to become something. It's such a fortune to be born into a good family, with good people around you. Yeah. Proud and with an affectionate pat on the young lady's shoulder, Zix clenched his fist and cheered her on energetically. Anyway, give it your all. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, fighting. With that, Zix quickly moved towards the dock, laden with baggage once more. The silence left in the wake of a storm. Confusion surged in with a delay. Tanya, clutching at her armful of belongings, spun her confused eyes in circles. Chapter 73, Winter Survival 6. Great work. Having completed the submission of academic matters, the planning proposal and basic preparations for freshman class assignments, the drafting of academic schedules post-opening, the final exam grading and ranking, and the preparations for the full professor evaluations, Assistant Professor Claire buried her head on her desk, feeling as if her soul had been drained. Just get through next week's freshman class assignment test, and you can rest for the remaining holiday period. It's amazing, Anise. Such stamina, really. Your skin hasn't even bloomed. I'm already getting flaky. Is this youth? With her head down, Professor Claire only turned her head to look at the tabletop mirror. A corpse stared back at her. On the other hand, Anise, encircled by documents at the central research desk, was almost unrecognizable in her shimmering elegance. Although she seemed fresh as if just at the beginning of her shift, she had incredibly been working 2 consecutive all-nighters. This was the result of her dedication while being the sole assistant in Claire's understaffed lab. Anise managed everything, even the trivial tasks not her own, to the point where one might confuse who was the professor and who was the assistant. As expected, external scholarship students can't be relied upon. Meanwhile, Anise sighed as she flipped through the paperwork. Unlike Anise, who worked directly as Claire's chief assistant, it was difficult to expect a sense of belonging from the scholarly student workforce. One must be careful in assigning important tasks to them, and even for minor ones, careful checks were necessary to ensure proper handling. Third-year Yenica or first-year Clevius, nobody handled the paperwork cleanly. There was always something to nitpick over in these document-related tasks, though it might indeed be challenging at the student level. Still, Claire had foolishly expected the bare minimum. Mostly, Anise had to redo the work. The only exception was Ed Rothtaylor. The most worrying student, Ed, was expected to require close supervision by Anise. However, surprisingly, he required none. If it weren't for the concern over Ed and Yenica, Anise might have been more efficient attending elsewhere. Supervising someone who already did their job well was pointless. The administration and practical handling of paperwork were without fault. Typical student workforce usually lacked experience and proficiency, often neglectful even in trivial matters. But Ed Rothtaylor seemed not to simply dismiss problems but looked for flexible, solution-oriented approaches. For instance, during a preliminary site visit for the exam, he didn't just follow a checklist. This entrance could be incorrectly used by students, we should block it off in advance. This pathway is too slippery. If it's like this on exam day, we'll have problems. The exam area is larger than expected. We should either reduce the scope or increase the number of magic stones hidden to adjust the difficulty. Ed's practical problem-solving skills did not seem typical for someone born into high nobility. This was unexpectedly startling. Pretending not to be surprised would be a lie. By the way, Anise, you were with Ed, right? How was it? Pretty much the same. The same. You might not know, Anise. Ed was expelled, right? I am aware of that. Are you? Then, here's a secret just between us, would you like to hear? Now slightly relieved from the overwhelming work, Professor Claire playfully proposed to Anise. That Ed, do you know where he lives? In the forest north of the academy. He built a cabin there, in the northwest corner of that vast forest, and lives alone. Really? Yes. I followed him. During the Ophelius Hall occupation incident. Keep this a secret from Ed. A top secret about Yenica's unrequited love. Not even Yenica herself would casually share such a fact. Anise swallowed and nodded. It turns out he built quite a sizable camp for himself there, complete with tools, a bench, fireplace, display stand, drying racks, a smoker, and nothing looks mass-produced. Unexpected craftsmanship for someone who does not appear inclined that way, right? Is that so? Plus, he's even made contracts with spirits. Spirit affinity training is notoriously inaccessible. I'm not sure how he managed, but he must have worked hard for it. Suddenly Anise saw a glimmer of the reasons behind Ed's problem-solving abilities. Surviving alone in the wild necessitates facing and resolving numerous practical problems, skills naturally acquired from overcoming day-to-day challenges. Nobles, cocooned in comfort, could never achieve such practical sensibility, an underrated skill, but Anise knew its worth all too well. So when Anise followed Ed, it seems quite fitting. You two share more than you think, right? Me and Ed. Well, sure. Have you seen the progression in Ed's grades? Want me to show you? Aren't students' grades not to be disclosed to others without consent? Oh, right. Laughing it off, Professor Claire playfully twirled her hair. Anyhow, when I saw how determined he is, I got a real sense of it. Even Professor Glass cheered him on. In spite of the disadvantages, he lives and strives without complaint. Not everyone can do that. It's somewhat embarrassing to be spoken of in that regard. Well, but I think it's quite impressive. After saying that, Professor Claire looked up at Anise. Anise, now accustomed to the mountain of paperwork, maintained her poise despite the heavy workload. Despite being a commoner, she often received compliments that were befitting for nobility, for good reason. It's flattering to receive such high praise, but... Anise, resting her chin on her hand, pondered. Before considering Claire's high praise of herself, the assessment that rested in her mind was of Ed Rothtaylor. Her recent reconsideration of Ed wasn't simply because his past misconduct had been forgotten. It would be difficult to extend a warm encouragement for a beautiful romance with Yenica based solely on a reversed evaluation. Yet, upon engaging with him firsthand, there wasn't a single fault to find. A robust boy, nothing more. He did not seek recognition for his efforts, nor did he flaunt his hard work. Simply a man firmly carrying out his duties in weighty silence. Reaching this thought, she wondered if he wasn't just a truly decent man. Objectively, he wasn't bad, decent looks, no arrogant demeanor, and Claire's favorable reviews. To think his persona as a womanizer was all an act seemed even more unnatural. Upon reviewing Ed's behavior closely, there seemed to be a gentleness. Unintentional knowledge, but he also seemed physically fit, and the embrace suggested a surprisingly reassuring scent. Without the typical student odor of sweat or musk after a day's labor, it seemed he managed his hygiene well, likely to avoid inconvenience to others. Anise, are you daydreaming? Caught off guard, Anise inhaled sharply and shook her head quickly. No, just thinking about something work-related. Should we open the windows for some air? It's a bit stuffy. Yes, let's air it out. Just make sure the papers don't fly away. Yes, okay. Despite the mundanity, Anise gulped down her breath as if struck in the back of the head by a hammer. No wrongdoing was committed, just an objective observation. Ed just made an assessment of the man, nothing more. He hadn't thought that rating others was sinful, but a vague sense of guilt seemed to tighten around his heart, causing goosebumps to crawl up his spine. Why so? Anise wouldn't bother to pinpoint that emotion exactly. However, she doesn't deny that she felt a certain special connection knowing that Ed resembled her. The hardships of a life lived with grim determination aren't easily shared with just anyone. Her friends from Sylvania, drunk on the romantic lives of young girls, were accustomed to lively and charming topics rather than heavy and gloomy stories. The male students throwing themselves at Anise for her looks were no different. Most had never seriously reflected on life beyond the youthful troubles of being a student. It wasn't particularly a bad thing. A student's charm is at its peak during their school days. Besides, it would be unusual to find someone serious and somber amidst the romantic-filled Sylvania Academy. Only those who have faced it know that cold reality bites harder than the harshest winters. Anise had revealed a slight hint of her genuine feelings to Ed, something she now tried to chalk up to a momentary lapse. Anise, your face is all red. Did you perhaps overdo it? Professor Claire's words made Anise feel as though her heart was pierced by a knife. She abruptly rose to her feet, approached a mirror to lift her bangs, and examined her face. Seeing her flushed cheeks and dilated pupils, she realized her situation and quickly sought to regain her composure by splashing her face with water. However, the cold sweat kept pouring. But she couldn't deny the truth. Objectifying vague notions of feelings and emotions was Anise's forte. Pretending ignorance was no longer an option. Yet, was this emotion not still manageable? Discovering it early was, at least, a silver lining. Emotions have stages, and if cut off before they develop, they can be neatly wrapped up. While trying to calm herself, a remark by Professor Claire flashed through her mind. And he even made a spirit contract on his own. You know, spirit resonance training has entry barriers. I don't know how he did it, but he must have worked hard. Indeed, there were entry barriers in spirit resonance training, and without the help of a high-level spirit practitioner, such progress would be hard to explain. As for who might be the high-level spirit practitioner around Ed Rothtailor, the answer was quite obvious. Moreover, Ed mentioned camping in the northern forest, which is completely within Yenika's territory. The spirit Ed contracted would most likely be from the deep parts of the northern forest. If the spirit that Ed contracted actually accompanied him or at least witnessed his time with Anise. Anise swallowed. Since work is done, want to grab a snack? Should I bring something? What would you like? Oblivious Professor Claire was insistent only on getting her tea brewed. A comprehensive disaster. The Faylover family's ranch wasn't enormous, but it was reputable within the town for raising high-quality livestock. This was largely attributed to the family's values of thoroughness, harmony, and coexistence. Being the sole daughter of the Faylover family, Yenika had never been arrogant despite her exceptional talent. Rather, it was her beautiful heart, filled with consideration and love for everyone, that shined brighter than her abilities. Yenika is kind. There's no one as warm-hearted as Yenika. The same was true even after moving to Akan Island. Leading a life like a beloved storybook character, far from loneliness and surrounded by sincere friends, however, a life without worries did not exist. Under the bright moonlit night, by the guardian tree of Merelda. As Yenika trained in spirit resonance and looked up at the guardian tree, it was still. Lush and vast regardless of the season. She sniffled lightly. Yenika Faylover stands out among the junior year students for her recognition, popularity, and skills, truly an ace among aces. As a merchant, I may have financial ability, but natural charisma that draws people in, well, not everyone has that. Politics is all about taking sides, right? It's crucial to win over those who are loved and supported by the students. Don't worry too much, since Miss Yenika always listens and trusts people with her inherently good nature. Still, respect her as a senior. It's unlikely, but Miss Yenika might be feeling down. I've never seen her that gloomy, but just in case, refrain from upsetting her. Thanks to Lortel's sincere advice, Tanya felt as if she had gained an entire army. Such a chance to converse with the actual power behind Elk Trade wasn't common. Tanya was initially puzzled by Zix's unexpected reaction, but there was no time to dwell in confusion. Next week was the entrance exam for the new student class allocation, then the break would end, followed by the student council presidency election shortly after the new term. It was time to start networking. Eventually, she arrived at the great tree by the northern forest lake, known as Merelda's guardian tree. Though to Tanya, newly arrived at the school, it merely seemed like a large Zelkova. With a handful of servants, she had managed her way through the treacherous paths of the northern forest to reach it. For the chance of winning Yenika over, she was willing to endure much. She saw the silhouette of a girl gazing at the Zelkova. The girl, slender like Tanya, had pretty pink braids cascading over her shoulder. The girl sent off a flame-made bat with a wave of her hand, seemingly having a conversation just moments ago. To Tanya, with no spirit resonance skills, it seemed as though she was just stretching her arms. Composing herself, Tanya called out loudly, "Hello, it's nice to meet you, Miss Yenika." With due respect in her voice, she greeted. Turning slightly towards Tanya, Yenika seemed exactly as Lortel had described. Naturally kind and lovely, an idol adored by the whole academy. Perhaps the ideal senior Tanya had envisioned. For Tanya, who had lived her whole life in a noble hierarchy, a senior who could genuinely interact outside those structures was nothing short of romantic. The sense of warmth and relief seemed to alleviate all tension, and picturing her academic future, Tanya smiled gracefully. "I'd like to introduce myself and chat, if that's all right with you." After speaking with dignity, she looked at Yenika. While she seemed exactly as imagined, there was a hint of gloom on her face. Was she troubled by something? Still, Tanya had heard that Yenika always listened and trusted others. "My name is Tanya Rothtailor." As she introduced herself with a bright face, Yenika turned her gaze towards her. Under the bright moonlit night. Chapter 74. Surviving the Winter. 7. The surplus magic engineering supplies have been sorted. You can pick them up if you speak to the store staff. Also, we've managed to source most of the materials you listed, except for the legendary crafting ingredients. It's difficult to procure them, especially during winter. Twilight sand for the Dulheim hourglass is hard to come by this season, and there are no available Gluck's-Eye Falon mountain crystal orbs on the market. It seems like we've got an estimate for the crafting formulas that can currently be researched. Devices like the grapple hand, which can pull objects from a distance, Craigle magic ink, that increases magical inscription efficiency, and illumination orbs, that serve as lighting are manageable without Lortel's assistance. The issue lies with magic engineering goods of rare grade or higher. While research could lead to their creation if materials were available, very rare, grade items or higher start requiring magic. Some processes involve directly imbuing or removing properties. The primary crafting goal was the lightning-struck Millennium Staff, a very rare item needing magical inscription, but currently, I can't use magic. There are other methods, but they're quite troublesome, so it's a dilemma. Seeing Lortel, he looks quite tired. It's the end of the year. Regardless of the era or setting, the year-end is a hellish time for those in business. They must wrap up the year's work, settle accounts, plan for the next year, all while handling the onslaught of regular duties. I know you're busy, and you even took care of my request. It could have waited. I took care of it while I was at it, so don't worry too much. Aha. Stretching his arms with an air of nonchalance suggests he was working in his office right up until coming to camp. Sitting across the campfire, Lortel, who seems to have lost some energy, slightly lowers the corners of his mouth. The fleeting smile suggests he's quite fatigued. Coming all this way just to relax, and even teaching me stuff. It's not a short distance. I came to relax, so don't worry. Closing his eyes and sipping the herbal tea, he looks utterly at ease. A few snowflakes quietly settle down. I wrap up the books I was reading and place them under the tent. The moon smiles. The once full moon now leaves only traces. Time flies by when you're caught up in the hustle and bustle. The sound of flowing river water has also stopped at some point, and looking over the campfire towards the riverbank, thin ice has formed. Even the river, thought to flow year-round, has entered hibernation, and the camp is swiftly enveloped in silence. Sitting alone in the winter night camp, it feels as though time has stopped. This silent moment comes fairly to everyone, but how it's received varies. To me, this winter is a time to regroup, rest during the vacation, and a trial to protect myself from the severe cold. But for people like Lucy and Lortel, transcendent from such concerns, this winter's silence probably doesn't mean the same. Surprisingly, Lucy and Lortel, seemingly different in every possible way, share something fundamental. It's not anything grand, rather, it's a feeling most people bear quite commonly. Different in form, but most people carry loneliness in their own ways. And winter's emptiness aggravates that loneliness annoyingly well. Those who've walked alone through the quiet streets of winter nights know the sensation of traversing a sleeping world reinforces one's solitary state. Winter has that kind of magical power. Not a particularly pleasant story, but true. You've had a tough time. Actually, there's a lot more to talk about. Lortel speaks in a calm tone. Why is Lucy sleeping there? It's winter. Does that answer the question? Shrugging, I draw a sigh from Lortel as he takes another sip of his herbal tea, then looks at Lucy with a contemplative gaze. He mutters about her possibly overreacting, then smoothly changes the topic. Honestly, I wouldn't have come all this way just to talk about magic engineering supplies. Is there something else? Oh, pretending not to know. Lortel smiles wryly, gathering magic in his hand. A considerable book materializes above his palm, floating in midair, unmistakably the sage's manuscript. I'm the censor for this book. Oh, you went through with the bid. That's right. His fox-like grin while stirring the campfire made me wonder, recalling a detail I'd forgotten amid the rapidly changing situation after collapsing from overwork. I had implored Lortel, promising to fulfill any request if he bid on the sage's manuscript for me. It turned into an interesting story, didn't it? The sly smile as I rub my forehead. After all, it was my own words. Of course, I'm not foolish enough to burden Ed with a task so immense it's difficult to fulfill, but as a merchant, it's only right to recoup the investment. What kind of grand request are you planning? Just take my side. Dissipating the manuscript with a swirl of magic, Lortel looks down across the campfire. Take your side. It's just intuition, but I feel a significant turning point in my life will come before I graduate. Why bring up such a topic now? Ultimately, it's Winter's doing. Talking under the crescent moon, Lortel seemed almost otherworldly. Politics is about choosing sides. Perhaps there will come a time when everyone living here must make a binary choice. What kind of absurd assumption is that? Think of it as an absurd assumption and hear me out. Though labeled absurd, it's not entirely so. Lortel has a sense of what's coming. A destined rival awaits him. The Princess of Benevolence, Phenia Elias Clarel. Ascending to the Student Council president in her second year, she dominates the academy and unveils the shadows of the Rothtaylor family, essentially, the main character of Act 4. If that time comes, please take my side. That's all I need. The showdown between Phenia, expanding her role from Act 3, and Lortel is not for me to decide. Ultimately, it's Taylor's choice of side that will determine the winner. My support might not mean much, but I don't think we're going to lose. Right. Senior, although your reputation within the academy has improved a bit, in both political and non-political terms, your support won't likely lead to any significant outcomes. After all, you are just a student. It feels strange hearing it put so bluntly. So what? It's not about whether or not it has political significance. Lortel chuckled and continued the conversation. It's a matter of whether it matters to me or not. That's not too difficult to manage. The remnants of the crescent moon still shone brightly enough, casting a dim light over the camp. I was taken aback by the sight of Lortel's face illuminated in the moonlight. Teasing and probing into the other's thoughts with a bewitching smile is a common practice for Lortel. However, seeing such an innocent smile was a new experience. Indeed, she could be called a girl with 1,000 faces. I'm pleased. She said this plainly and swirled her mug gently, quite befitting of Lortel herself. There is one more message I have left to convey to you. The time at camp was mostly spent discussing various matters and the state of the world. Despite this, they claimed to feel rejuvenated and well-rested, which seemed odd, but since they said so, I remained silent. In fact, this is the main point. It was frustrating having the main topic brought up only when it was time to leave. What is it? Senior Ed, you have a younger sibling, right? With a bright smile, the conversation continued, giving me a headache. Your younger sibling seems to be grinding their teeth over various issues. I wasn't sure if they really see you as the enemy of their house or if it's just a slight grudge born out of sibling rivalry, so I left it alone. Honestly, it was kind of cute. Tanya. Yes, that's right. Lortel stood up, dusted off her clothes, and grinned. Well, I did take some light measures, nothing too serious. I just introduced her to some people around the academy to feel out the atmosphere. Is that so? She plans to go around today and come find you tomorrow morning to give you a piece of her mind. Since Tanya is your sister, you know her well, right? Does she truly resent you that much? She asked a little more seriously. If she really does, I think I may need to reconsider my position. I didn't respond immediately, just rubbed my chin in thought. It was a matter that required deliberation. The early morning sun was blinding. Given that it was vacation, there were no classes or academy scholarship student duties to attend to. I thought about sleeping in but decided to get up early to make the most of the day. Unlike the night, the northern forest felt lively with the sun up. The chirping of sparrows and the rustling of leaves in the light wind were soothing to the ears, a change from the silent night forest. Quote. Lost in the freshness of the morning air, Lucy emerged from the cabin following in my steps, staggering and sleepy, almost like a doll. During the break, the rules of Ophelius Hall seemed to relax, and it felt like we spent more time at the camp than in the dorm. Our days consisted of napping, going out to eat, eating together, occasionally reading books, and taking walks. From my perspective, there was nothing to complain about. At least during the winter break, Lucy's magic was of great assistance, so it was preferable for her to stay at the camp. I didn't want to over-rely on Yenica. Could you start a fire? Lucy, still bleary-eyed at the entrance of the cabin, lit a campfire before the sentence was even finished. She then slumped over to the other side of the fire and curled up to lie down. Apparently suffocated by the cabin's air overnight, she had come out for a breath of fresh morning air. After stretching my limbs, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the fire. Sinking into the morning atmosphere, an important realization hit me. Since Tanya is your sister, you know her, right? Does she really resent you that much? I gulped dryly and took a deep breath. As I've mentioned before, I don't know. Ed Rothtailor of Sylvania's failed swordsman exits as a third-rate villain in the first act of the first chapter. I can only speculate about his life while living in the Rothtailor residence. Given the hapless and bewildered Ed Rothtailor, it's hard to believe he lived a decent life. It's highly likely, even certain, that Tanya Rothtailor genuinely hated Ed Rothtailor. What she might plan to do or how I should respond is still unknown. I have no idea what terrible things Ed might have done to Tanya while they lived in the Rothtailor residence or the extent of her grudge. Up until now, my knowledge of the future has served as a solid basis for judgment, but for this case, that reliable future knowledge is worthless. I must adapt on the spot. Sigh. Once more, I exhaled and washed up, combing my fingers through my hair. This was undoubtedly a tricky situation. What's the use of worrying? At that moment, I saw a figure walking. In the distance, a young girl accompanied by several servants. Even from afar, the figure bathed in the morning sunlight breaking through the forest was clear. Her wavy golden hair was memorable, a color all too familiar to me. Bright golden eyes and a confident stride were exactly as I had seen in the third act. I simply sat at the camp's chair and watched the approaching figure without moving. Tanya Rothtailor, the biological younger sister of the body I now occupied. Our relationship was unknown, so I had to remain still. By staying put, I could at least avoid making things worse. Tanya's sharp gaze stopped in front of the camp. Silence enveloped us for a moment. She scanned the camp's surroundings before turning her intense eyes towards me. Slowly, she opened her mouth. "Oh, it's been a while, brother." A servant beside her took out a neatly packed tie pin as a gift. I brought a present since we haven't seen each other in so long. Quote ellipsis question mark quote. I smoothed my lips and looked again at Tanya. She diverted her gaze awkwardly, seeming somewhat afraid, or perhaps embarrassed. It was as if she had seen something daunting. At the very least, Tanya didn't appear to harbor deep grudges. Then, I was able to come to a conclusion. Yes, that's it. Well done, Ed Rothtailor. It seems you had a sufficiently solid life while at the Rothtailor residence. Sorry for jumping to conclusions. I was unaware. Chapter 75. Surviving Winter 8. It didn't seem to get any better. After working as a head maid for several months, Belle concluded that although her salary had certainly improved, the scope of responsibilities that came with the pay increase was excessively wide. Wasn't the position of chief in charge of the Ophelius Hall, a critical facility, acknowledged within the academy as a rank akin to the elders? Thanks to that, aside from her salary, there were a tremendous number of benefits. For starters, the uniform was so splendid and dignified that it overflowed with authority, individual work and living quarters were provided, and there was no need to do any rough work. Moreover, there was the matter of social perception. Acting as the head over the maids of Ophelius Hall meant that even the noble residents would treat her with a level of deference, as they heavily relied on the services provided during their regular lives. Nevertheless, Belle Meyer sighed deeply. The former senior maid, Belle Meyer, was a hands-on practitioner. Now, as a manager, she was not involved in maid-like work at all. Although she claimed to be a maid and donned the outfit, she never really did any maid's work. If she tried to handle a kitchen knife for preparing ingredients, the youngest maid would rush out to grab it away, claiming she would handle it. If Belle attempted to collect laundry, the laundry-responsible maid would pale and dissuade her. She couldn't even understand her head-maid uniform to begin with. Adorned with fancy rose-patterned accessories and festooned frills everywhere, she wondered how anyone was supposed to work in such attire. The role of the head maid ultimately proved to be no more than a front madam representing Ophelius Hall. It didn't take long for her to grasp this fact. Just like in high-end restaurants where the most experienced chefs aren't actually cooking, something of a similar feeling applied here. The reasons behind the former head maid Ellis not getting much involved in the practical operations began to make sense. With such elevation in rank, this position could no longer be truly called a maid. Her workday consisted of welcoming important visitors to the Ophelius Hall, inspecting the cleanliness during inspections, and monitoring and correcting the posture of the maids. Administrative tasks such as organizing documents for reports to the academy were also part of the job. Young and advanced in her position, one would normally swell with pride. However, Bellmeyer sighed as she crossed the corridor. It just didn't seem to fit her nature. Above all, she was more comfortable with hands-on maid work and found it more satisfying. Not particularly ambitious by nature, the role left her feeling quite hollow. She had never envisioned herself overseeing the dormitory personnel, inspecting the conditions, directing work, and maintaining discipline among the maids who were constantly watchful of her. The reason Bellmeyer was able to serve long-term was simply because she enjoyed bringing out the flavor in cooking, took pleasure in washing laundry immaculately, and found a certain fulfillment in assisting students overly concerned with their academy lives. She wasn't cut out for brandishing authority amongst the strictly disciplined maids, rather, she liked the satisfying job of waking up a student who slept in, even helping tie their hair up. Have the lists for the new students arriving been finalized? Yes. Terry Renuel, Wade Callamore, Tanya Rothtaylor, Kylie Eckner, Clarice, Haig Machal, and Master Drake make a total of 7. Bell internally nodded at the memorization skills of the secretary maid who had accurately recited the new arrivals. In Ophelius Hall, given that the number of admittance was not high, it was standard for the maids to know each of the academy students intimately. There are still a few days left for the freshman class assignment tests, so most have not yet undergone the admission process. Miss Tanya was the first to arrive yesterday, and if the notification is correct, she should be arriving sometime today. As Belle listened to the secretary's report and strode forward, she encountered a student walking in from the opposite end of the corridor. Calmly settled white hair adorned with abundant gold threads, the attire was neat and imposing, indicative of the son of a commander who once ruled the northern border territories. His name was Wade Callamore, a new student at Sylvania Academy highly anticipated to secure the top position in his class. Customarily, the head maid would personally welcome new arrivals to Ophelius Hall. Yet, seeing Wade already present without having been informed beforehand, Belle couldn't help but feel a bit of embarrassment. "Good day." Wade greeted her with a polite bow, to which Belle hastily reciprocated. "I apologize for not notifying you in advance. I was originally supposed to arrive this afternoon, but my schedule advanced, so I arrived earlier than planned." "Oh, I haven't properly prepared to welcome you, and you've seen such a sorry state." "No, it's my own fault for arriving unannounced." Wade inclined his head slightly again. "The actual site of Ophelius Hall, which I've only heard of in rumors, certainly lives up to its reputation. Clearly, the facility is impeccable thanks to the veteran staff. It also helps that it hasn't been long since it was renovated. Please, speak comfortably, there's no need for honorifics." "No. As a freshman just entering, it is only right to extend the minimum courtesy to someone who is always busy managing this Ophelius Hall. After all, I'll also be relying on your services, how could I treat you like just any other maid?" With those words and a gentle smile, Wade's demeanor was somewhat uncomfortable to Belle. Ever since she was promoted, everyone around her seemed to use honorifics exclusively. "You've arrived early. Most students won't start taking residence until the following week. I wanted to get a feel for the school environment in advance, and moreover, it's important to pay respects to Princess Phenia beforehand." Wade smiled warmly, adjusting his sword sheath with the emblem of an eagle and lion engraved, a symbol of protection from the Clarel royal family. "Given that most of my family serve in the central army of the royal household, it's only proper that I pay my deepest respects to Princess Phenia, the star of the Clarel royal house." His outspokenness was significant. It wasn't sarcasm but a natural attachment to them. To Wade, who grew up in a military family, loyalty was as innate as limbs, appearing almost zealous. "Am I the first among the new residents of Ophelius Hall?" "No. Among your peers, Miss Tanya has already taken residence." "Is that so? The other person has yet to arrive, perhaps I will see them during the class assignment tests." "That person, you mean?" There was no need to further clarify who he spoke of. Belle intuitively knew. This girl was among the most exceptional of the new students. Under the patronage of the Telos sect, revered by a countless number of worshippers, the girl was the sect's beating heart. It was difficult to even speak casually to her, a presence that made people swallow their words. Asterisk. Plates crashed and meals spilled over. A worm was found in the soup served by the maid from the Rothtailor family. A young boy with golden hair flashed anger in his eyes. Standing silently beside him was a maid who was slapped across the cheek. When he demanded to see the person responsible, the kitchen attendant came forward immediately. The boy, seeming much older than his years, grabbed the attendant's cheeks and dunked his face into the still warm, spilled soup. While wiping his soup-soaked shoes against the attendant's apron, the boy berated him. The boy's sister sat quietly at her seat, simply continuing her meal. While practicing swordplay, the boy suddenly called over the gardener and started to beat him with a wooden sword. Upon asking why, the boy retorts that it's part of his training and to endure it. When the gardener cried out in pain and suffering, the boy admonished him, asking how he would feel if his sword training as the upcoming head of the Rothtailor lineage was interrupted. The gardener fell silent. Taking pleasure in flagellating the plump, sluggish gardener with the wooden sword, the boy's lips curled up, seemingly enjoying a peculiar excitement. He knew well enough that he lacked talent in swordplay and that he wasn't sincere enough in his training to practice so zealously. He simply reveled in beating the servant. The girl reading in the corner of the garden had no choice but to watch and remain complaint-free. Her father spent his time occupied with official duties in the imperial city. Upstanding family elders had given up on the boy and merely whispered among themselves. Since the noble Lady Arwen's passing, this boy had turned into a little tyrant, and this manor was his kingdom. On his 15th birthday, the lavishly decorated house bustled with feasting. He was satisfied with the gifts prepared by servants who demonstrated forced loyalty, unbothered by the falseness of the celebration. Seated with an elbow on the table and a chilling smile, the boy stomped and shattered a gold amulet, a collective gift from the servants, under his foot. Laughing heartily at the shocked expressions of the servants, he sneered. Then he turned to Tanya and said, "Look at that. Did they think I'd genuinely be happy with a gift from people no better than the dirt on the floor? Or did they think such false flattery would put me at ease?" And with that, he kicked over the banquet they'd spent all night preparing and destroyed the decorations. And still laughing, he said, "My birthday is still 5 hours away. I want a splendid celebration, so prepare a proper birthday party from now." Looking at Tanya, who was quietly quivering but trying hard to hold back, he spoke. "Do you have a complaint? Do you feel attachment or pity for those who are no better than tools? It seems you aren't fully a noble yet." And then he whispered in Tanya's ear nastily, "I suppose you see me as trash, don't you? Your patience is impressive, to hold back from rolling your eyes in contempt. It's truly remarkable how you've learned to socialize and sense others' needs. But, living together for so long, it's inevitable to notice. You don't consider me fully human, do you? So, what will you do? Can you do anything? Will you kill me? With Arwen gone, if I were to die, you would take over the inheritance, wouldn't you? Well then, try it out. Here, take this ornamental dagger. Plunge it into my chest. Go on, just like this, I'll place it in your hand." The boy placed the dagger in Tanya's trembling hand and guided it to his chest. With a push of force, the boy's breath could be snuffed out instantly. But the boy knew, no strength would be put into that hand. If she truly killed the boy, no one understood better how grave the responsibility would be than this girl. It was merely a demonstration of status. Tanya's trembling hands loosened, and she dropped the dagger. The boy with the golden hair looked down at the fallen dagger and then burst into loud laughter. After his fit of laughter subsided in an instant, he looked down at Tanya again and said, "Thank you." Quote. The chirping of sparrows resonated several times in the morning-lit northern forest. The boy was surprised that the necktie pin Tanya gave him was of such high quality, but considering her origins, such a gift would hardly be a burden. "Strictly speaking, I'm currently in a position of banishment. It's kind of you to go this far for someone who's not even your brother." It's. Tanya had something else on her mind, or maybe she was thinking of old times, and she was hesitating and trailing off in her speech. "I'll make good use of it. I'll start wearing it to school from next semester. I pulled out 2 wooden mugs to brew some herbal tea, setting the water to boil. When I opened the storage chest, I found that the herbs were nearly depleted. In this world where I've been left penniless, she may be the only person I'm connected to by blood. Considering she doesn't seem too hostile towards me, there's no reason to skimp on hospitality. Well, since she's of noble birth, it's not like a simple cup of tea would impress her much, but it's the thought that counts. What are you standing there spaced out for? Come and sit by the fireplace. Why yes, I will. She moved towards the campfire with quick steps and, with wide eyes, looked around the camp. Amongst various sights, the first thing to catch her eye was Lucy, sprawled out sleeping by the fire. This child, who is she? Ah, her, don't worry about her. She's just a visitor who pops by from time to time. Hey, make some room. Don't just stand there. Lucy rubbed her eyes a few times and lazily shifted to the side. Tanya watched with a look of curiosity but refrained from prodding further. I handed Tanya a mug filled with the herbal tea. She took muck, still seeming a bit tentative. I hear you've been visiting other academies to get a look around. Have you met anyone interesting? Ah, yes, I've heard a lot about you. About me. There aren't many that know me well enough to talk. Who? Someone like Zix. Ah, yes, I've met Senior Zix too. I sipped my tea, tilting my head in thought. Beyond Zix, my social circle was fairly predictable. The peer I could call a close friend would probably be Yenika. Tanya choked on her tea, hastily pulling the cup from her lips. She brushed her hair to the side, nodding with a subtle tremble. Ah, right, Yenika's kind, isn't she? Out of the people I know, she's probably the nicest and most well-meaning. Yes, she's really kind. She's truly, incredibly kind-hearted. For real. Her sudden enthusiastic praise of Yenika was rather unnatural. When I asked why, she rapidly shook her head and continued. Further, it's not just kindness, she is also incredibly powerful. High-ranking fire spirit. A lizard as big as a house. Tossing servants around like toys. Instead of ignoring someone's response, she kindly and elegantly encourages them to work hard in school life. Breathe while you talk. A trivial curiosity then crossed my mind. Did you actually see her summoning high-ranking spirits? Normally people avoid calling such spirits due to the high magical energy cost. I didn't see it. I really didn't. It's all in my imagination. People said high-ranking spirits look like that, so I just made it up creatively in my head. Please don't misunderstand. No need to deny it so vehemently on such a trivial story. After acknowledging her explanation, I looked over Tanya again. Clutching her mug tightly and casting her eyes down, her demeanor was less confident than I expected. The Tanya Rothtailor I knew was much more arrogant, always carrying herself with unshakable self-assurance. Something felt off, and the more I contemplated, the more my judgment seemed askew. I had imagined a good life in the manor for her, but perhaps that conjecture was too far-fetched. After all, it was hard to believe that the pathetic third-rate villain Ed Rothtailor hadn't planted any ill feelings in Tanya. Her anxious demeanor was evidence of that. Hey, Tanya, I was quite pathetic back in the mansion, wasn't I? I regret a lot, and while I can't undo everything, I've been trying my hardest, so don't view me too harshly. I've already been punished and disgraced because of those sins. Tanya Rothtailor is nothing more than a villain in Act 3, Scene 3, there just to highlight the nobility of Princess Phenia. Not just because all Rothtailor characters typically serve as villains, but by the very nature of the script, they're doomed to be expendable. I've heard you want to be the student council president. I support your ambition. I may not be of much help, but I know you're always trying, so be strong. Despite what I was saying, I already knew. Tanya could never defeat Princess Phenia. The support from the entire academy for Phenia was overwhelming, something no competitor could overturn. Even though the princess herself had not yet announced her candidacy, once she joined the campaign, the other contenders would simply be washed away like the outgoing tide. It was regrettable but inevitable. However, Tanya Rothtailor was the only kin I had the chance to interact with in this detached world. The value of blood relations in this foreign land is indescribable. Sure, there was still time before Tanya would exit the scenario. Her early departure made it all the more poignant to grow attached. Having shared my thoughts, I observed her as Tanya's eyes were wildly flickering. Quote ellipsis question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark quote. It was as if she couldn't understand what was happening, reflective in her bewildered gaze. I decided it was best to remain silent rather than continue speaking. 2. Build a storage shed. 3. Expand the cabin. 6. Improve my dark arts to the 3rd level. 7. Acquire special archery skills. As my holiday objectives dwindled, only 4 remained. After Tanya left, I spread the magical artifacts and materials I had received on the camp floor. Comparing them with the list Lortel had provided, there was indeed a considerable amount. If I hold myself up in the secret library to focus solely on dark arts, it seems many useful items would be forthcoming. After the upcoming freshman class assignment exams, concentrating on the dark arts might be a good decision. Also, I need to keep up with combat skills. My proficiency in that area lags behind others. Considering the limitations of my physique, it might be more efficient to selectively master the truly vital skills. Of all the archery skills, magic arrow is one I definitely want to acquire. If I can shoot arrows infused with magic, the endless chore of arrow maintenance becomes unnecessary. The process of retrieving each arrow, maintaining the heads and shafts, is labor-intensive. This is a major reason for my reluctance to use a bow in hunting. Even though I've forced myself to practice archery to improve my skill proficiency, it will suffice to master magic arrow so I can cease bow training. Combining it with elemental or spirit bindings should be straightforward. Nevertheless, this winter might prove to be a turning point for growth. As tough and cold as the season is, spring will eventually come. I sat among the trees, exhaling beneath the tall canopy. It's time for the freshman class assignment tests. A section that never gets assigned even a single student, unfair, but the test is still the test, and I have to oversee it diligently. After all, as a scholarship student of the academy, most of my duties aren't particularly crucial. The important tasks were mostly handled by Assistant Professor Claire or Anise. I just need to do my assigned job well. It's cold. I wish spring would come soon. Regardless, nothing feels quite right to me. Everything is riddled with questions, Ed being the most baffling of all. Tanya crossed the Ophelius Hall corridor deep in thought, but her mind was a mess, unable to sort anything out. She had seen Ed's upbringings up close, growing up alongside him. There's no way that tyrant who was expelled could have so easily mended his ways. A person's nature doesn't change so quickly. However, his gentle reassuring of Tanya had almost convinced her to trust in the familial bond in the spur of the moment. Yet, even if everyone else believed in him, Tanya would never easily do so. She had seen firsthand his vile nature for many years. As she crossed the Ophelius Hall corridor, the memory of last night's vision chilled her. Under the crescent moon, casting Osri's light over the center of the northern forest, stood the spirit master Merelda and her sacred tree. When lambasting Ed in front of her, Tanya nearly burned to death by a real impact from the fiery lizard. She likely didn't intend to actually kill, but the sincerity of the angered girl convinced Tanya. At least that spirit master girl genuinely trusts and follows Ed. Considering the Ed she saw earlier, it didn't seem too far-fetched, yet it still felt strange. He wasn't an actor, and true colors often show after a year or so. Still, the way he earned people's trust seemed exceedingly unnatural. For now, I need to rest in my room, and sort out my thoughts. Ever since I arrived in Sylvania, I've been lost. This won't do. Taking the time to think things through slowly is paramount. Taking a deep breath, Tanya tried to regain her composure. She's been disconcerted and confused since arriving in Sylvania. She must restore her calm. Repeating this to herself, she was about to enter her room. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of fluttering robes. Turning her head, she saw a petite girl stumbling through the corridor. It was a familiar face from the camp. At a glance, she seemed especially close to Ed. The girl's long white hair trailed along with her body movements. She cut across the hallway in her oversized uniform, pressing a witch's hat down on her head, before grabbing the doorknob to the room next to Tanya's. Evidently, she's returned from being scolded by Ophelius Hall's maids. There's a discernible lack of confidence. For a resident of Ophelius Hall with such high status, it's somewhat pitiable that she can't command even a single maid and is easily influenced. Her appearance speaks volumes, with the disheveled uniform exuding a lack of elegance. There's no grace to be found. As Tanya felt the girl's gaze upon her, the girl hesitantly turned her head. Then, with the same stumbling steps, she approached and patted Tanya's shoulder as she stood on her tiptoes. "If there's anything troubling you, speak up." Tanya's eyebrows raised slightly at the casual remark, and the girl opened the door and entered the adjacent room. Regardless, she's the occupant of the room next door. Perhaps Tanya should at least learn her name. She glanced at the nameplate on the door. There hung a gold nameplate, signaling the top student of her year. Room 302, Lucy Merrill. Tanya stood there, utterly perplexed. It seems it would take some time to adapt to Sylvania. Certainly, none of this was Tanya's fault. Chapter 76. Surviving Winter 9. There's a saying that to see the true nature of a person, you should give them power. Tanya had lived her life agreeing with that saying hundreds of times over. Until Arwen Rothtaylor, the eldest daughter, was the heir to the family, the Rothtaylor mansion was always a place of peace. Everybody at the mansion watched for Arwen's lead since she was the next head of the family, but she remained neither arrogant nor intimidated. She lost none of her noble elegance, seemingly unshaken by the minuscule amount of power she held in her hands, focusing only on honing herself. In her, one could see the essence of grace that isn't swayed by trivial power. Under the overwhelming brilliance of Arwen, who seemed perfect in every way, lived Ed Rothtaylor, who was only the second child in the mansion. Up till that point, he seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. But after the death of Arwen Rothtaylor, Ed, as the heir, reigned over the Rothtaylor mansion. The kind of person he turned out to be, a tyrant who, with that little bit of successor's power, acted as if the whole world belonged to him. This was the real Ed Rothtaylor that Tanya saw. How despairing it was that a man who could be so corrupted by a smidgen of power was the heir responsible for the family. She could not just let it be. That's why Tanya had to bring Ed down. To assert her will, she had to prevent Ed from becoming the head of the family by any means necessary. Should she kill him? If solving everything with a single dagger stab was possible, she wouldn't have agonized this much. The weight of the title, heir to the Rothtaylor family, was immense. Plunging a dagger into Ed's chest would guarantee Tanya's own demise as well, a fact clear to anyone, and besides, Tanya was then just a young girl who had only begun to awaken to her magical powers. It was too much to expect such a young girl with freshly held dagger to boldly stab or to slyly plot someone's death without anyone knowing. Such expectations were unreasonable. In the end, there was only one path set before Tanya. Lurking in the dark shadows, she clenched her teeth, training herself, waiting for the right time. She spent nights studying, diligently practicing etiquette and honing her magic, patiently enduring until dawn broke. Ed did not lay a finger on Tanya, his sibling who shared his blood. But what kind of life was that for Tanya, who had to spend her years under the thumb of such a pitiable man? She bit back her anger and played the role of the compliant sister. She persisted amidst the suffering people of the mansion, sympathizing with their pleas but living as a powerless being unable to resolve their problems. She often spoke of her noble lineage, but never did she raise her voice in assertion. Huff. At the end of a long day, Tanya, buried in her bed in Ophelius Hall's private room, took a deep breath. So many things had happened in just one day. The number of things unknown was just as vast. Yet, there were still more tasks ahead. She had lived half her life under the oppressive rule of a brother akin to a despot. What value had she found in her life, refining herself as the possible next head of the family, some may ask. Quietly to herself, Tanya would reply, "I survived, pretending to be dead." She had no doubt that her opportunity would come. With Ed expelled, all that was left was to prove herself. To Tanya, the upcoming student council president election felt like an opportunity of a lifetime. But before that, I must do well on the class allocation exams. The assembly is 3 days from now, at the entrance of Mount Oren. I need to prepare. Her words trailed off as she quickly succumbed to sleep, overwhelmed by fatigue. It was a deep slumber she hadn't experienced in a long time. Please introduce me to a man. For head-maid Belle, her connections outside Ophelius Hall were very valuable. Most of them were people she had known since her days as a senior maid, so they were comfortable to deal with, and for Belle, who rarely ventured outside Ophelius Hall, they were important sources of external information. Among them, Anise, Yenika's closest friend, was one of the welcome visitors who often sought her out. Their visits were mostly to exchange opinions on Yenika's love life. As Belle was Yenika's maid during her time at Ophelius Hall, she knew her well, and with her keen eyesight, she could quickly understand the essence of interpersonal relationships. Belle had hoped to hear of some progress between Yenika and Ed when Anise visited this time. As curious as any human could be, Belle was all ears, ready to listen, especially since Anise had come to her so actively seeking advice. It must have been something significant. If possible, someone good-looking, tall, and talented would be nice. With casual determination, Anise spoke as if Yenika didn't even matter to her. So sudden, what do you mean? Belle, you've been working in Ophelius Hall for a long time, so you must know many outstanding male students without lovers, right? I cannot reveal personal details about the students. It's okay. Just introduce me to a nice guy, that's all. It was early morning in the rose garden of Ophelius Hall. Belle was there, tidying up the rose branches that had grown onto the walkways, to prevent the new students from getting pricked by the thorns. Anise looked peculiarly tired, as if she had lost sleep, but that wasn't unusual. She was always burdened with multiple responsibilities, juggling various scholarship duties with her academic work, and solely managing Professor Claire's research room as the head assistant. An average person with ordinary organizational skills and time management couldn't handle such workload. But, Miss Anise, you surprise me. I wouldn't have thought you'd be concerned with matters of love. I have every right to experience love. Even if he's a bit annoying, I still want someone tall, someone who you can tell is well-bred at first glance. You're not the type to meet men so carelessly, are you? Or, do you even have any experience in love? Quote. I apologize. I didn't mean anything by it. Belle, uncharacteristically, misspoke. It was a rare occurrence, maybe once a year. Even Belle was flustered amidst her own confusion. You've always been so busy, always doing your utmost to take care of yourself. So naturally, I assumed romance wasn't on your agenda. Like young Master Ed, who'll be in his 3rd year soon. You two share some uncanny resemblances. Ahem. Anise awkwardly grabbed her chin, turning her gaze to the side with a hesitant look that didn't sit well. Ed Rothtaylor, who else but the man Yenika Faylover was hopelessly in love with? And Anise, Yenika's trusted best friend without a shadow of a doubt. Such a relationship graph was already clearly mapped in Belle's mind. Belle cautiously probed Anise, quick to catch the nuances. Perhaps. Anise's gaze veered to the roses, oddly evasive for no apparent reason. Belle involuntarily held her breath for a moment. Regardless, you're so astute, Belle, I won't bother hiding it. Yes, it's exactly as you think. How did it come to this? Well, it's quite a funny story. That man had a pretty bad reputation, you know. He's notoriously known for his relationships with women. While I did hear most of them were just rumors, I thought I should check for myself. So, what then? Well, getting involved like this, things happen, and that's where it went. More in common than expected, conversations that click, a man with a certain solidity, it just was like that. From halfway through, Anise mumbled, trailing off, turning her head while letting her words disappear into the air. Yet to Belle, her keen eyes were quick to catch the blush on her ears. What kind of large event was this? Belle was left stunned, barely holding onto her senses. There's no need to hide it. I'm self-aware. I don't dabble in self-deception or futile attempts at hiding my feelings. So eventually with Master Ed Fine, I'll admit it refreshingly. I felt some attraction towards him as a man. That's possible, right? I'm a woman. Now that things have come to this, I'll admit it and plan accordingly. Right. Anise's keen problem-solving skills, resolution ability, and drive were highly commendable. But love between people isn't something that can be handled as straightforwardly as other tasks. Yet it was none of Anise's concern. For her, it was easier to deal with things cut and dry. Belle. Yenika is a dear friend who means a lot to me. If anything, this is good news. If a man of true substance can attract me, it means Yenika really found the right match. What other cause for celebration could there be? Miss Anise. If I quickly sort out my own feelings, then there's no more cause for concern. It's fortunate that I noticed early. Emotions, after all, are part of the mind's chemical interactions, right? If you think of them as a malignant tumor, it's quite fortunate. I found it out early. It's fortunate that I have the habit of objectifying myself and adopting an objective viewpoint, Anise reasoned. Expressing this, Anise took a deep breath and quietly sat down in the rose garden's gazebo. Even without doing much, she looked tired, which Belle saw as rather concerning. I've recognized the problem and have an idea for a solution. Now, if the treatment goes well, everything will be settled. It would have been worse if it was discovered too late to manage. Consider the state it's in. How dreadful it is. The fact that it was discovered so early on is truly a cause of celebration. Even calling it treatment is a bit. After all, life is a series of connections, and even for a man, it's not as if there's only one man in the world. Just meet a new connection and fall in love properly, right? You make it sound so easy. Even issues that seem complicated become simple once they're systemized, don't you think? Anise places the bundle of documents she was holding onto the gazebo's table with a thud, then briskly begins writing something with her quill pen. Belle sneakily lifts her head to glance at the paperwork. Through the twisted gap, the lower page reveals all manner of mind maps concerning Ed Rothtaylor, with various strategies and impressions for future handling. There are plenty of crossed-out parts and overly detailed sections, suggesting considerable effort was put into it. Though she appears relaxed on the outside, she is waging a war inside her mind. Regardless, attraction can be covered with even greater attraction. Meet a better, wholesome man, have a lovely love affair in my own way, and everything resolves well, right? Now, if only we could find a man to replace him and start spreading the rumor that we're lovers. I have two opinions I'd like to share. It's unlike Belle to interrupt Anise, but she halts her mid-sentence, and Anise tenses, listening attentively. Firstly, asking to be introduced to a substitute man, that's a great offense to the person in question. At the very least, I cannot arrange a meeting with someone in such a manner. Her ability to deliver her straightforward opinion without offending is indeed why she is called a veteran maid. No matter how high-ranking Miss Anise is, there have never been instances where you've lacked such consideration for others. And even if you are seeking new connections, there is no need to hastily stamp a relationship status. It seems to me, Miss Anise is acting quite desperately. Quote. Could it be, Miss Yenika has noticed Miss Anise's affection? Anise gasps and takes a deep breath. If so, that explains why you are rushing to create a romance for yourself. Belle's perception is something Anise is well aware of, which is why she often sought Belle out to discuss Yenika's love life without hesitation. Anise likely never imagined that sharp perception turning on herself. Regardless, my heart already belongs elsewhere. The cleanest way to prove that innocence is to find a new lover. Miss Anise, you really do value Miss Yenika, don't you? Before her own feelings, Anise is more afraid of Yenika getting hurt, hence, she quickly sets out to find a solution. At Anise's words, Belle hesitates for a moment, but then confidently smiles as if to show off. Such packaging makes it sound more plausible, doesn't it? Anise then clears her throat a few times and continues. As grand as you make it sound, I believe that ultimately, human emotions are nothing more than collections of organic reactions that can be adjusted. It's not as grand a consideration as all that. It's still early, so we can adjust slowly. Have you met Miss Yenika? Ignoring all of Anise's words, Belle's cutting question silences Anise again. She then slowly admits, as if in confession. Yes, I passed by the teacher's hall the day before yesterday. We didn't greet each other and parted ways. Something was awkward between us. She seemed gloomy. I see. And, next week I have to proctor the class assignments with Ed. I don't know how I'll face him. After speaking, Anise lowers her head, lost for words. Belle sighs deeply, rests her chin on her hand, and falls into contemplation. In a corner of the rose garden, where sparrows chirp in the morning sunlight, silence passes by for a long time. It may not be as grave as you think. It could even have a positive effect. At last, Belle offers an unexpected conclusion. Pardon, if you think about Miss Yenica, she cannot remain forever like an unblemished canvas. Belle ponders until she finds a way to wrap up the conversation without hurting anyone. There's one person who might become an even bigger headache, but for now, there's no helping it. Belle mentally sends a deep prayer of apology to Ed. You know as well as I do, Miss Anise, that Miss Yenica is always kind and sincere to others. While that is surely a good thing, people sometimes break down much more easily than expected if they don't dispel negative emotions. Belle sits down next to Anise and slowly continues. Perhaps, it could be a good opportunity for Miss Yenica. To become angry, to speak up about dislikes, to grumble. It might be difficult at first, but releasing emotions in such a manner can be surprisingly helpful. Really. Moreover, jealousy is one of the emotions that best stimulates such responses. Since Miss Yenica is truly altruistic, she likely has little experience harboring deep jealousy towards others. And becoming confused by such feelings could certainly weaken her heart. She will struggle quite a bit. Isn't that exactly what Anise was concerned about? Before Anise could point out that nothing has been resolved, Belle beats her to the punch. Wasn't the problem initially that Miss Yenica was too perfect? Anise is speechless once more at Belle's poignant words. Now, follow my lead. Protectiveness. Reminded of a past conversation with Claire, Anise is suddenly at a loss for words. Belle already knew. Where else would Yenica go when? Her heart became troubled. Belle quietly sits there, gently patting Anise back. She comforts as if to say there's no need for guilt. What's this, when did you arrive? Quote. I had just placed the magic engineering supplies near the entrance of the library, covering them with a tarp to keep the snow off. The time to prepare materials for warehouse construction was drawing near. Practice in magic engineering skills was on track, but I shouldn't get lazy with training. Especially since I felt we needed to expand the internal space of the cabin. Most magic engineering training would happen at the library, but it would be convenient to perform simple chores or processes at the cabin. I'm considering punching out one side of the wall for storage space and maybe another side for a living space. I contemplate whether that would be too much work. I'll have to find a balance with the holiday schedule. Returning to camp, thinking about the production schedule, it was quite chilly. Just wearing a blanket over my shoulder, I approached the blazing bonfire where Yenica was sitting, hugging her knees. She didn't have her usual lively aura, and her expression looked downcast. Cold. Want a cup of tea? Upon my offer, she nods quietly, resting her chin on her knees. The usually chatty Yenica was silent, holding something heavy in mind. I fill the last herb into the cup, dry the leaves, take 2 cups, and sit down beside Yenica, handing her one. She takes the large mug carefully with her small hands. Quietly sipping the tea, we sit side by side in front of the fire. Snow again. Seems like it's coming every 2 days now. Soft snowflakes fall, settling atop the already accumulated snow. Evergreen trees retain their colors even in winter, but against this blanket of white, they have no choice. All around, the world is draped in white, making the sharp brightness of the fire even more noticeable. Glancing at Yenica, she's still holding her knees, watching a few tea leaves float in her cup. Such a disheartened Yenica is rare. She knows too well how discomforting it is for others when she's not her cheerful self. If you're troubled, you can talk about it. At this, Yenica suddenly lifts her head, looks at me, but then stops speaking. Instead, she says with particularly sad eyes, I'm sorry, I can't talk about it. Then no need to force it. What is often forgotten is that even Yenica has her limits. Her downcast gaze and hunched posture likened her to a small cornered animal, eliciting an inexplicable protective instinct. I casually wrap my arm around her other shoulder, and gently pat it. Sharing the warmth of the thick blanket. I worried she would flinch and pull away, but instead, Yenica lifts her head like a mole peeking out and tries to speak again before falling silent, her energy visibly drained. Finally, Yenica buries her head on my shoulder. We sit in silence watching the fire for a while. Winter persists. The cold harsh enough to make a single blanket and fire barely bearable. But spring is approaching, step by step. Chapter 77, Freshman Class Assignment Test 1. Keep your distance from me. What? Don't come within this range of me. It was the day I was supervising the freshman's exam. The winter break was well on its way, and I had grown accustomed to living without the use of magic. Preparations for expanding the cabin were also in their final stages. Essentially, all the major tasks that needed to be completed before the next semester were already taken care of. This meant if I could just wrap up supervising this exam successfully, there would be no further issues to worry about. With a sense of urgency to finish up quickly, I gathered my strength and headed to Assistant Professor Claire's research office. It was time to start the day. It seemed I was the first among the academic scholarship students to arrive, as Anise was the only person visible, busy checking magical engineering supplies in a corner of the office. As I tapped her on the shoulder to greet her, Anise jumped like a grasshopper, instantly putting distance between us, all the way over to the window behind the professor's main desk. She then looked at me with a gaze intense enough to bore holes. Why so sudden? What's going on? It's just, you smell. I really dislike the smell of sweat. Please, keep your distance. The school places significant emphasis on appearances, as much as to have a clause on maintaining dignity in the school regulations. Cleanliness is strictly managed. At least, I had almost never received any remarks about the state of my clothes or appearance. Though it's been relaxed due to the vacation, I sniffed my sleeve to check but didn't notice anything unusual. I don't smell anything, and there's this look in your eyes. Or an aura, something about it just doesn't sit right with me. Anyway, please stay away. Anisa's sudden defensive behavior was more baffling to me than anything. As she usually has her reasons for everything, I simply shook my head and moved on to clean up the research office table, which was in disarray. If I didn't at least tidy up the basics before Assistant Professor Claire arrived, it felt like the office would descend into chaos once again. Anisa's failure to sort this out implied she was too busy to take care even of such basic matters, so I decided to help out without being asked. Mostly, I dealt with documents that had expired processing deadlines and were therefore to be discarded. Gathering various documents together, I picked up a binder that had been left lying in a corner. Its volume was quite substantial. Bang! Before I could properly file away the documents, the door to the research office burst open, and Assistant Professor Claire strode in confidently. Hello. More lively than the students themselves, Claire greeted the morning with cheerful vigor and placed a box of snacks on the table. Want a scone? After spreading snacks on the table, Assistant Professor Claire asked Anise to make her some black tea. As Anise was in the middle of checking the magical engineering supplies, I extended my hand to help. Startled, Anise reached out with one hand, keeping a firm distance and holding the other hand to her chest, as if she was hand-feeding a wild animal. I casually accepted the documents handed to me. The task of checking them was familiar enough not to require additional explanation. It was a simple review process. Ah, Clevius and Yenica have arrived too. Now that the examination management team is all here, we can get things organized and head out. Biting into a snack, Assistant Professor Claire then plopped down in her chair, unfolded the finalized exam plan on the table with a thud, and began to go over it. The exam location, as previously announced, is Mount Oren. Since our academic management team consists of 4 individuals, we'll each take one of the allocated cardinal directions, east, west, north, and south, and conduct our inspections. In the case of an accident or detection of cheating, use the communication equipment provided in advance to report to me. For cheating judgments, follow the instructions given in the distributed documents, but I doubt the freshmen will be able to carry out any significant and organized cheating. Just remember, you can't go easy on them just because they're cute juniors. With that said, she resumed nibbling on her scone. Her energy levels were particularly high today, probably because she had just returned from a few days off after dozens of hours of intensive work. Normally, she's quite spirited, but a few overnighters would reduce her to a zombie-like state. It's as if her personality resets periodically. And there's a freshman you absolutely must be cautious of. The Lady Saintess Clarice. She's not someone you commonly encounter, so I'll give you a briefing on her appearance. Long silver hair reaching down to her waist, red pupils, and a red butterfly hair clip on the side. If by any chance you do meet her, show the utmost respect, understand? In Sylvania, the emphasis is more on the value of education rather than societal hierarchy. There's a general inclination for the gap between social standings to be bridged by the shared title of classmates. While nobles are never egregiously disrespected, one can't expect the same level of deference as found in the homeland. However, there are clear boundaries which, if crossed, necessitate courtesy towards even lower classmen of such stature. Of course, individuals of such noble rank seldom enroll, so the boundary of this unwritten rule feels somewhat indistinct. Nevertheless, with last year's admission of Princess Phenia, the line has somehow become clearer. Individuals of the status of a princess or a saintess must be treated with the reverence due to a subordinate, regardless of their academic standing. This is a warning so that no one accidentally offends her. It's quite difficult to differentiate, really. The public-facing saintess Clarice looks more saintly than anyone else. Regrettably, she's an imposter. It's a fact not revealed until the moment right before the final act of the third part, but the real saintess Clarice has been swapped with another student. The girl attending school under Clarice's identity is thoroughly disguised with physical alterations and illusionary magic. The true saintess is a student assigned to first-year Class C named Kylie Ekner, though that's an alias. She has altered her appearance to enroll in Sylvania and is living as an ordinary student with brown hair and an innocent look, claiming to be from a noble family of an obscure small island nation in the eastern continent. This revelation is one I found quite shocking when I first encountered it, as I felt suspicion should have arisen when she was given immediate free access to the Ophelius Hall. These facts are only known by the chief figures of the Telos Church, the school principal Obel, the 3 high chancellors, and the head maid of the Ophelius Hall. Even the guards tasked with protecting the substitute are unaware of the deception, illustrating the meticulous planning that went into this ruse. While I applaud the saintess's efforts to gain an education at Sylvania, she's unlikely to graduate peacefully. The so-called saintess Clarice becomes central in the final stage of the third act, the pursuit of Lucy, with everyone rallying against her. Without her, Tylee can't learn the sword ceremony, Shinsalgium Xian Shajian crucial in defeating Mebular, the final boss of the fourth act. She's an important character indeed. So I hope she manages to get by without any mishaps. Anyway, for situations not covered here, refer to the manual, and if you need to ask any detailed questions, send me a message. I'll be on standby at the peak of Mount Orin. That's all set, right? Assistant Professor Claire checked the time with a quick glance and nodded. Let's go up Mount Orin to get all the welcome magical engineering equipment set up, check the altars, and wait for the students to be escorted over. Wrap up your snacks, and we shall head out. The result is known. The freshman class assignment test resulted in everyone failing. Though it's not so much a failure, as the evaluation is all relative. It's just that no one was good enough for Class A, though there is some distribution based on performance. Since this isn't a story experienced by the protagonists, it's merely mentioned briefly in the main scenario of Academy's Failed Swordsman. Due to Assistant Professor Claire's miscalculation in determining the difficulty of the class assignment test, no freshmen end up in Class A, resulting in a high number of Class B students who wish to be promoted to Class A during the semester. And so bursts the episode of joint combat practice, fueled by the competitive spirits of the first-year students aiming for the title of Class A. In this episode, the protagonist generation, now in a senior role, engages in a joint combat training session with the first-year students. Despite the session being presented as a friendly match, the first years take it very seriously and competitively. This intensity is because the grades awarded in this session will significantly affect future class reassignments, prompting the first years to use any means necessary to win, even seeking extra fights outside of class for bonus points. However, all their attempts are thwarted by Tylee, showcasing the significant growth Tylee has achieved over the past year. This episode not only highlights Tylee's development but also evokes a profound sense of satisfaction and nostalgia in the seniors as they watch their juniors. Nevertheless, this episode carries an underlying tension, as Saint Clarice, hidden among the crowd, takes special notice of Tylee during these events. Ah, huff. Midway up Orin Mountain, leading the group, Assistant Professor Claire was at the forefront, followed closely by Anise. Behind her came Yenica, a senior, and then it was me and Clevius trailing behind. Claire was burdened with a heap of grading papers, while the rest of us were lugging around cumbersome magical engineering equipment. Due to the equipment's sensitivity to magic, transporting it via telekinetic magic was strictly prohibited. Although most equipment wouldn't actually suffer damage from such handling, the precaution of manual transport was preferred to avoid any potential issues. Even though the climb wasn't particularly steep, the weight of the equipment made the journey challenging. The male members, all academic scholarship students, managed to carry their loads without much trouble, but Anise seemed to be struggling, gasping for breath under the weight. "Hey, if it's too much, hand some over. You're falling behind," I offered, noting the significant weight of each large, half-dome-shaped piece of equipment. Even the men were breathing heavily from the climb. It was evidently too much for Anise's slighter frame. As Anise began to lag more noticeably, I passed Yenica, who was also sweating profusely, and caught up to Anise to help lighten her load by taking some of the equipment she was carrying. "Ah, thank you, Senior Yenica. It was really too heavy for me, ah." Anise, turning to express her gratitude and mistaking me for Yenica, was startled upon seeing my face, nearly losing her balance in the process. She managed to regain her footing but not before dropping several pieces of the equipment. Clank, clatter. The dropped items rolled down the path but were swiftly caught by Clevius below. His reflexes lived up to his reputation as the top combatant. "Shouldn't you be more careful? What if they broke?" he admonished, tossing the equipment he caught onto the pile he was carrying. Despite the momentary lapse, Clevius's strength was undeniable. "Sorry, I didn't expect you to follow me all the way here," Anise panted, her cheeks flushed with exertion. It was clear she was pushing herself too hard. Noticing her determination reminded me of my own experiences with overexertion and the understanding that sometimes, pushing too hard can lead to unnecessary hardship. Exhausted to the point her ears turned red, Anise was gasping for breath. Observing her, I couldn't help but frown. It was clear to anyone that Anise was pushing herself too hard. Having spent a few days with her, I could tell Anise Halen was unusually diligent in everything she did. I understood that mentality. Living on the edge makes one fear falling behind at the slightest hint of laxity. I've been there myself, pushing too hard until I was worn out by overwork. Reflecting on this, Anise's current state felt all too relatable, stirring a desire in me to help her break this cycle. Rest is part of the work, a fact often overlooked. Without recognizing this, enduring success is hard to achieve. Take a break. We'll start setting up without you. What? Any objections? I glanced back at Yenica and Clevius, who both nodded in agreement. Anise was carrying around a dozen magical engineering devices. I took them from her, one by one, tossing some to Clevius and some to Yenica, who caught them effortlessly and stowed them away. Soon, Anise's hands were empty. "Just wait why didn't you ask? I told you to take a break," I stated plainly. "There's no point in forcing it when you're out of energy, it only makes you a burden." Adjusting the devices in my arms, I gently pushed Anise towards a nearby rock, urging her to sit. She looked up at me, bewildered and breathless. "Rest when you need to. It's only harming you to do otherwise." After saying this, I signaled the others that it was time to continue. The mountain we were climbing hardly deserved the name. A few more minutes of ascent would bring us to the top. "I'll scatter some magic stones, you two proceed with setting up the devices in the designated spots. We have plenty of time before the newcomers arrive after lunch," said Claire, the assistant professor, with a smile. "Great work, everyone. Finish the setup, check your assigned sections, and then we can start supervising. The operation isn't complicated, so we should be done in about 30 minutes if we place everything as planned," she continued. Clevius and I, along with Yenica, had reduced our load by installing some devices at checkpoints along the way. "Phew, to think these low-tier illusion devices weigh this much," Higher grades must feel like carrying boulders, Yenica commented, taking a seat on a nearby rock to wipe his sweat. Clevius seemed less affected, quickly refreshing himself with some water and stretching his body. Considering his physical strength and skill in swordsmanship, it was ironic how he'd panic in actual combat. Remembering his past as the black sheep of the renowned swordsmanship family, Nortondale, it was understandable, yet it was a story for Tylee to unfold. Taking a moment to rest, we admired the view from the top of Orin Mountain. A grand altar stood on the open plateau, marked with indecipherable runes on a massive stele, more a pillar than a stone, its top sheared off. This was the stage for the final battle of Act 3, the Altar of Change. I closed my eyes, recalling the scene: dark clouds above, a genius archmage looking up, apostles of the god Telos with eagle heads covering the sky. The god declared the end of Akan Island, with mages intent on killing the god's apostles and their companions facing off before the altar. A girl, adjusting her large witch hat, stated softly her disbelief in gods. "Hey, what are you doing there? Who's that?" Yenica's shout snapped me back to reality. "What is it, Senior Yenica?" "Ah, nothing, thought I saw someone atop the altar." Must have been my imagination. It was unlikely anyone would climb such a grand, neglected pillar. Must have been the climb. Seeing things, I guess. Yenica shrugged off his concern. "Let's finish setting up the devices and wrap up the test. Once we're done, we're free until the end of the break." It was a lot of effort for the final task. Muttering complaints, we got to our feet, busy with the preparations to welcome the new students on time. "Hey," Yenica, about to start installing a device, paused and straightened up. "Seems like some of these are broken, or not." Chapter 78, Freshman Class Assignment Test 2. Dean McDowell felt himself relaxing a bit in the laid-back academic atmosphere that prevailed over the school. Sitting at his desk in his office in Triss Hall, this aged gentleman stretched grandly before poring over the pile of documents again. Even during vacation, academic administrative reports were less than half of the usual volume. Though the reduced workload was preferable, the painful reality of his position requiring work during the break was lamentable. McDowell often wished for a minimum quality of life guaranteed, despite the seniority that often leaves little room for complaint about workload. Today is the day for the freshman class assignment test, isn't it? He scanned the submitted reports from the professors responsible for class assignments in the combat, magic, and alchemy departments. The locations and contents of their exams varied, yet each provided reasonable grading criteria. Particularly intriguing was the magic department. Professor Glast's oversight had always governed its class assignment tests. The academy trusted his discernment entirely, leaving all matters in his capable hands. But now, Professor Glast was absent. How would the magic department assess and distinguish new students' abilities? McDowell found this transition quite interesting. The new point person for the test was Claire Elfin, Glast's protégée. Rumors about her were so frequent among the academy elders that they bordered on tiresome. By all accounts, she must have saved a nation in a past life. Her fortune with people was said to be otherwise inexplicable. Regardless of whether they were mentors or disciples, only the finest talents seemed drawn to her. One wonders if she's blessed with a fate that attracts people, or simply that none around her are dispensable. Such luck is the envy of any faculty member, and McDowell considered her a person consistently blessed beyond reason. He pondered whether she truly was so fortunate. Flipping through Elfin's department roster didn't clarify his thoughts. If anything, it made him feel ambivalent. Assuming there must be a reason, McDowell signed off on the documents. Research Office Roster Report, Assistant Professor Claire Elfin. Office Senior, Claire Elfin. Leading Assistant, Anise Halen. Academic Scholarship Personnel, Yenica Failover, Ed Rothtaylor, Clevius Nortondale. This isn't good, ah. Sitting atop Orin Mountain, Assistant Professor Claire Elfin sighed with worry. In front of the altar lay 6 or so damaged magical engineering devices. It seems the circuits are twisted from an external shock. They're dead even with magic infused. This will require a separate repair request from a professor of magical engineering. But there's no time for that now. Illusionary discs. These were rare magical engineering devices capable of drawing opponents into confusion with illusions of all sorts of beasts and demons. The plan was to scatter dozens of these devices as traps on the path leading to the summit. While it wasn't a big deal that 6 or so had malfunctioned since many other discs remained, it was frustrating that the most important ones were the ones to break. The most crucial discs had to break. This is a headache. The violet discs Anise had been carrying were different from the others. They were made with intricate circuits and powerful magic, meant to serve as the final challenge in the class assignment test. While ordinary discs might produce illusions of wolves or kobolds, the violet discs would spawn formidable demon races and beasts. As far as I knew, the majority of first-year students were quickly subdued by the gray bears, red-blood gargoyles, and banshees that emerged from these discs. When, later questioned by the academy, Claire answered innocently and terrifyingly, Isn't overcoming that what A class is all about? Despite her apparent naivete, as Glast's disciple, she was cruelly decisive when it mattered. One could not judge her solely on appearances. No choice, then. With only 2 violet discs left, I'll just have to proceed with the test. We'll have to place them where paths overlap to compensate. She seemed nonchalant, but she knew all too well this was not a favorable situation. As the coverage of violet discs diminished, the test relied more on luck. Students who inadvertently avoided the violet discs would pass easily, while those with greater potential, but unfortunate enough to trigger one, would fail quickly. How did we manage to get all this here, only to end up not using it? Clevius's gloomy appearance complemented his despondent attitude as he desperately ruffled his hair. Wow, seriously, after all that trouble, how could this? He held his breath mid-sentence upon noticing Anise sitting quietly in a corner near the altar. Anise was the cause of the issue. She had insisted on carrying the important magical engineering devices herself to prevent loss, but ended up dropping them. While they looked sturdy on the outside, anyone unfamiliar with magical engineering might not realize how sensitive the internal circuits were and the degree of care needed in handling them. Claire's nonchalance was also problematic. She assumed Anise would handle everything properly, leading to negligence. I'm sorry. I should have been more mindful. No, it's... Clevius broke off, sweating profusely, his head bowed. Rubbing his fingertips, he silently grumbled, how can I be angry when she looks so apologetic? The mood dampened instantly. With Claire, Yenica, and Clevius silent, I decided to speak up. Standing here won't fix the broken devices. Clearly, the situation was dire. I knew from the main narrative of Academy's Failed Swordsman that it was precisely these violet discs prepared by Claire that had frustrated the first-year students. The details of the actual class assignment test were known to me only as distant news since I wasn't well informed about the specifics. However, I doubt such happenings occurred in the original story. Anise dropped the crucial devices because she was startled by my close presence. Considering that, one can easily foresee the subsequent events. If the significantly lowered difficulty of the test leads to an influx of A-class passers, this will affect the upcoming, Joint Combat Training, event. Freshmen driven by the desire to become the premier A-class students surge at Tiley. Tiley effortlessly overpowers these new challengers while St. Clarice observes with interest. The entirety of this narrative structure risks unraveling. Not only that, if the freshmen's class assignments are thrown into disarray, all the ensuing incidents and interpersonal relations will also venture into uncharted territory. Of course, not everything can be perfect. Some minor issues can be resolved, but this level of distortion is too significant to ignore. When does one feel the most immersed in the realm of learning at Sylvania Academy? If you ask Tanya, she'd say it's when she has the honor of interacting with her noble peers. Specifically, St. Clarice. It is said that the virtues of learning trump societal distinctions, allowing even those exalted as spiritual pillars to walk the halls of the academy as equals. Few have seen St. Clarice, and those who have often glimpsed her from afar amidst crowds. Millions recognize her as the spiritual cornerstone of the Telos faith. Publicly, Clarice always wore her radiant white holy garb, inspiring reverence and genuflection wherever she went. Yet, here she was, draped in the same Sylvania school uniform as the rest, a surreal sight that made one question whether she rightfully belonged among them. Her regal demeanor remained undiminished even in standard attire. Her nearly white blonde hair cascaded to her waist, and her still, crimson eyes were unsettling. Aside from a large red butterfly-shaped hairpin, her appearance was devoid of accessories, but she dazzled nonetheless. At Orin Mountain's base, awaiting the start of the test, the gathered magic department freshmen stood frozen. Practicing Telos followers dropped to their knees. Prominent figures from the Rothtailor clan, who had undergone Telos baptisms, were among them, and Tanya quickly lowered her head in reverence. "You may dispense with the formalities for my sake," said the young, yet clear voice. "Tending to every etiquette would only make life at the academy burdensome. Please, for my sake, be at ease with your courtesies." Despite Clarissa's request, most were reluctant to raise their heads. Tanya Rothtailor was the first to do so, her status putting her in the rare company of those comparable to Clarisse. "It is an honor to meet you, Saint Clarisse. I am the future head of House Rothtailor, Tanya Rothtailor." "Oh, the Rothtailor. Your patriarch Krebin received baptism from me. I hardly remember it, I was too young at the time. It's an event our house holds in high esteem." Tanya, known for her assertiveness, respectfully abided by the decorum, a shock to her classmates. She seldom bowed her head or deferred to anyone, but before the church's saint, even her character softened. "I've heard about your eldest daughter, Arnon. Though belated, I offer my sincere condolences." It was Arwen, not Arnon, but Tanya didn't correct herself. Doing so would only awkwardly strain the conversation. Given Clarissa's responsibilities to a multitude of noble houses, expecting her to remember every scion's name would be too harsh. It was fortunate enough for her to recall as much as she did. In any case, within Sylvania Academy, only Princess Fionia ranked on par with Clarisse. "I'm honored you remember and offer your condolences. I'll receive baptism when I come of age. I look forward to it, Miss Tanya." Their exchange eased the tension as other students began to relax. Though meeting the saint was a remarkable event, the immediate focus was the class assignment test at hand. The combat sector met in the student plaza, the magic sector at the base of Orin Mountain, and the alchemy sector below Obel Hall. While each department differed in meeting points and test content, their goal was uniform. The aim was to be assigned to Class A. Over the years, under Professor Glast's test administration, the prestige of Class A soared tremendously. The members of Class A, even at a glance, were not ordinary students. Lucy, Lortel, Zix, Aila, Adele, more than half were considered aces of well repute. In addition to such status, Class A students received additional benefits. Tuition was fully waived, they were entitled to reside in the esteemed Ophelius dormitory admired by the entire academy, and they had free access to most student welfare facilities. Whether they coveted that distinguished honor or the tangible benefits, a spot in Class A was irresistibly desirable to any newcomer. Indeed, all the freshmen who had gathered at the base of Orin Mountain shared these aspirations, with most yearning to join Class A for various reasons. The signal is the flare of magic at the peak of Orin Mountain, if I recall correctly. Muttering to herself, Tanya gazed upward through the crowd to the mountain's summit. With the magic flare as the signal, the dispersed magic stones hidden around Orin Mountain would begin to be imbued with various types of magic. After utilizing their resonance abilities to locate a magic stone and offering it at the altar at the peak, one passed the test. The type of magic stone found, the time taken, and the approach to overcome were all criteria for scoring, so haste was advisable. After all, these were freshmen of Sylvania. Not all were of noble pedigree, many were prodigies of exceptional talent across diverse fields, and just as full of scholarly ambition. Restricted to the magic department alone, plenty of notable freshmen were present. The Holy Maiden of the Telos Church, Clarisse, Tanya of the Rothtailor family, Agui, the successor to the Rokan mercenary group, Joseph, the youngest researcher of the Tog Magic Power Association, to name a few could go on forever. All eyes were focused on the peak of Orin Mountain. The edge of the altar, barely visible from below, seemed remarkably high. In the Nordendale household lives the sword demon, so the long-standing rumor goes. Losing his sanity meant no distinction between friend and foe. He would pierce eyes with daggers, rip out jaws bare-handed, tear flesh, and shatter bones. Any weapon in hand meant an unstoppable frenzy of tearing flesh and reveling in the spurting blood. Even within the esteemed Nortondale lineage of unparalleled swordsmanship, it proved difficult to turn that boy, ridden with an inner demon, back to humanity. Despite attempts to appear normal, without sanity, his surroundings turned bloody. Flashes of red in his eyes, he would slaughter everything around him, an ethical concept like morality having no place for such a monster. He knew swordplay without ever being taught, and within just 2 days of awakening to magic, he began wrapping his sword in mana. His talent as a swordsman was undeniable, as a human being, however, fundamentally the opposite. Even the family head, Evian Nortondale, in the end, gave up on him. The Nortondales knew well that Clevius Nortondale couldn't help the demonic nature he was born with. To suppress the demonic force within, it was necessary to sever him from his innate power. Rumors of a blood-crazed sword demon, the disgrace of the family name, and the pressure that such a monster was troubling everyone haunted Clevius since childhood. The label of a monster thus trailed him throughout his life. His shattered self-esteem turned him into an ominous being, yet at least he was no longer living as a blood-crazed monster. Holding a sword no longer brought joy. Instead, he felt fear that his power could kill something. Given the choice, he'd rather flee than fight. The learned fear consumed him from within, his depleted self-worth having become a constant. "You'll have to wield the sword." Words spoken by Ed Rothtaylor. At the peak of Orin Mountain, the altar of substitution. The members of the Clare Laboratory congregated to share their opinions. Among them, Ed Rothtaylor, lost deep in thought, suggested to change the content of the test. "The final altar will be defended by us. If the newcomers can break through the altar guarded by seniors, it means they're qualified for Class A. It's a fitting reason, and besides, historically, members of Class A have always been stronger or more capable than the seniors above them. So we're to take on the ascending freshmen directly. Then who'll supervise? There's no need. The supervisory system mainly exists to prevent cheating, but if we become the very problem they must overcome, there's no reason for supervision. As for safety, Yenica can probably handle it all by himself." Orin Mountain was too vast to be covered by a single person, but for Yenica, proficient in flight magic, safety checks might be manageable, if not detailed cheating supervision. But, the test content has already been reported to the Academy. Proposing changes now would be, "We can re-report, Anise. Just minor adjustments to the documentation and resubmission. Are you suggesting we carry out the test first and then report afterwards? Wouldn't that violate the school rules? If we run to report now, it'll be timely. The authorized reporter, Professor Clare, that is." With those words, all eyes turned toward Professor Clare. Though the suggestion came from Ed Rothtaylor, ultimately the decision lay with Professor Clare. "Oh, to write up the report now and resubmit, am I to be burdened with more work? Is it not possible, if I scurry back to the laboratory and quickly review the copies, I might pull it off just in time for the exam results?" Claire hummed in deep thought before asking Ed. For sure, maintaining the test as is could oversimplify it, leading to an excess of Class A qualifiers, that would stir up quite the aftermath, but on the flip side, even with you guys defending the altar, are you sure you can face all the new students? Precisely, we won't face everyone. We only need to deal with those who have found the magic stone and broken through the illusion enchantment field. If they've made it through all that, they must be at least a bit capable, right? Most will be too exhausted to go further. It should be manageable, I think. Without the purple disc, breaking through a mere illusion disc field would still be exhausting enough. At the center of the gathering, Ed washed his face with dry hands once again. Brushing his wet hair back, he took a deep breath and laid out the plan. In summary, while Professor Clare rushes to report with the updated documents, Senior Yenica will dash off for student safety supervision, Clevius will defend the southern entrance of the altar, and Anise will take the north. "What about you, Ed?" Upon Anise's inquiry, Ed casually touched the altar. "I'll guard the altar. I've thought things through, and believe I'd be more useful here." There's not enough time to explain in detail. After this agreement, silence fell among the group once more. Ed's alternative seemed reasonable enough. Anise was the top student of the elemental department, and Clevius was the de facto chief of combat. True, it might be difficult for the two of them to stop all freshmen who had broken through the enchantment field. But, given the exhaustion of the newcomers, the majority could likely be managed by them. Yet, there was no guarantee things would go according to plan, and the fact that Ed intended to remain at the altar troubled him. This mess is my responsibility, I won't voice any dissent. Anise readily expressed her decision. Professor Claire pondered before gradually siding with Ed, and Yenica showed no particular concerns. That left Clevius. The focus of everyone's attention now turned to him. Seriously, Clevius didn't trust Ed Rothtaylor. But with the consensus pointing in one direction, even Clevius found it hard to be stubborn. Fine, I got it. Swiftly descending the mountainside was Professor Claire. Yenica Faylover, awkwardly gathering her magic to hover slowly. Anise Hylan, gathering her elemental magic and moving north to block the entrance. Clevius Nortondale, unsheathing his sword with evident reluctance to defend the south. With everyone gone to their respective tasks, the silence returned to the altar of substitution. Only the occasional rustle of the wind disturbed the stillness, aside from which there was no noise. Left alone, I took a moment to look up at the altar. The huge stele was so tall the writing at its peak wasn't clearly visible. Surveying the surroundings, the panoramic view of Akan Island from the mountaintop unfolded before me. The professor's building to the southeast, the residential area to the southwest, the northern forest, the northeastern cliffs, and the coastal area at the easternmost edge. I took a deep breath of the highland air, then reviewed the enchantment object scattered on the ground. Enchantment object, illusion disc purple. Very rare, grade. A disc device that reveals the illusion of a formidable foe powered by the creator's mana. Crafted to a higher standard than regular illusion discs, it can reveal a stronger enemy. Construction difficulty, 3.5. This enchantment object is damaged. It does not perform to its full capability. There were 6 of these. My enchantment skills are still too rudimentary to fully repair them, but perhaps, by reassembling the internal parts well enough, I could at least achieve an output close to the original design. If time was needed, Anise and Clevius would provide it. I laid the discs down and returned to the altar. The altar of substitution. A mystical altar capable of extracting mana from any substance offered to it and allowing the mana to permeate the atmosphere and body. I took out a small leather pouch from beneath the altar. Professor Claire had brought it, filled with the same material as the magic stones scattered and hidden around Orin Mountain. It seemed to be the remainder that was scattered elsewhere. While these magic stones, filled with a considerable amount of mana, are quite valuable, it seemed adequate supplies were provided. Anyways, most could be retrieved via recovery spells. I took a stone from the pouch and offered it to the altar. The sensation of flickering mana lingered at my fingertips, a feeling I hadn't experienced in quite some time. Concentrating, I saw something resembling a flaming bat spirit. The paltry mana within was insufficient. The bat sprite seemed to be trying to communicate, but I couldn't hear it clearly. The mana embedded within wasn't as satisfactory as the price suggested. After checking the quantity of magic stones left in the pouch, I sat on the altar. The sight of Akan Island was breathtaking from beneath the gleaming altar. I relaxed a bit, propping my elbows on my knees. In that comfortable position, I sat silently and once again gathered my thoughts. A test for assigning new students to classes, unforeseen crisis management, maintaining differentiation, keeping an appropriate number of Class A qualifiers. I'd made all the plausible excuses but, regrettably, that was not where my interest lay. Frankly, I had no intention of allowing even a single freshman to pass this test. Regretful as it may be, it couldn't be helped. I utilized the light cluster generator, enchantment object received from Professor Claire to discharge a burst of flash magic into the sky. It was the signal for the start of the test. There I sat, in front of the altar of substitution, on the peak of Orin Mountain, quietly gazing downwards. The wind blowing down from the peak seemed somewhat more than just a natural breeze. Chapter 79, Freshman Class Assignment Test 3. Saint Clarice had 2 dreams. One while her eyes were open, and another while her eyes were closed. One dream was planted by the Archbishop Verju, and the other by the romantic Adele. You must become akin to a blank sheet of paper. Imagine an unshakable sea stretching beyond the horizon, Saint Clarice. Seek stillness, wide as the sea but silent as the absence of water's sound. Under the grace of God Telos, all are equal, and none should be taken lightly. We live to embody that belief. I firmly believe that true nobility stems from unwavering faith maintained throughout a lifetime. I have no doubt that nobility is endowed with invaluable worth that cannot be replaced by anything. Clarice was always taught by Verju during the day. Next in line to the ruler of the holy city of Carpea, Verju, as an exemplar of devotion to God, lived a life devoted to faith. The innocent lamb of Telos, Saint Clarice, herself felt ashamed of any personal failings in view of Verju's sincere convictions. He was someone worthy of respect, someone who should be rewarded by God above all others. While steadfast in heart, he did not boast, always striving to listen with equality to even the weakest of voices. Thus Clarice dreamed, to remain as pure and untainted as the dazzling Verju, living for Telos's will. In the life of a saint unsullied by even a speck of dirt, one who saves the faithful, lies a nobility unattainable by ordinary people. It is better to die in muddy waters than to live as a blank slate. Living only looking at white walls and ceilings can cause one's vision to deteriorate. One can never truly understand the romance of a world filled with color until they experience it. At night, Clarice listened to Adele's mandolin by the window. Whenever the night was filled with stars, Adele would appear. The self-proclaimed romantic, Adele. Once a girl with dead eyes managing the holy flames of the order, she left the church for unknown reasons. With her hair braided and adorned with beautiful flowers, holding only her instrument, she roamed the world and became a wandering minstrel of romance. Learning archaeology in the land of scholars to crossing the continent with only her instrument, even attending magic school in Sylvania during term time, she would wander the world again come holiday. A girl as free as the coastal winds. Even this holy imperial city, heralded as mankind's most magnificent structure, is but a mere sandcastle before the bizarre rocks of the Ramon Mountains. Musical note: will you be content with seeing the sky from the well, or will climb the wall to gaze upon the vast starry sea? Musical note: do you know there can be nobility in living an ordinary life, normally attending classes, mingling with friends, and falling in love? Millions of prayers from worshippers who admire me are not as valuable as the embrace from a beloved person. Somehow, the girl sang beneath Clarice's window at night, navigating between buildings, atop the tallest layer of the grand holy imperial city. Angels who carry Telos's will are said to fly freely about the world wrapped in their splendid wings. Clarice had never seen an apostle of Telos, but she could imagine them as holy and noble with their majestic spread wings. However, before she went to bed, Clarice saw on Adele's back a pair of wings that fit snugly, visible only to her against the star-filled night sky. With her eyes closed, falling asleep, Clarice would dream. The Ramon mountain region, Dinkan marshlands, the imperial city of Chloron, the pastoral lands of Fulantian, the alchemical lands of Crete, the commercial city of Oldic, the educational lands of Sylvania, the great desert of Drestia, the lawless region of Kohelton. She would travel the vast lands she knew only from books until, eventually, at the end of her journey, she met someone. Their face unknown, their body, personality, all a mystery to Clarice, for they were completely unfamiliar. At the end of it all, Clarice embraced someone deeply and walked the once lonely journey together. A journey filled with a vivid melange of colors, a stark contrast to a life of only pristine white. Burying her face in her pillow, she indulged in her most audacious fantasies. Oof, I'm starting to run out of breath, I need to pace myself. The exam proceeded efficiently. After all, nothing was too challenging. Scattered throughout the mountain were various types of magic stones to be found and offered at the summit's altar. The altar of substitution, once given a magic stone, converts it into magical energy that seeps into the owner's body, which then serves as a proof of passing. Magic extracted from natural sources, unlike that formed naturally within the body, carries a distinctive aura. It's difficult to wield such foreign magic as one's own, but that detail was inconsequential. What mattered was to absorb the magic and display it in front of the examiners. Tanya weaved through the underbrush, taking deep breaths. Concentration piercing through her brows, she could sense the residual magical energy around her. More than 30 minutes had elapsed since the start of the exam. Long gone were the students who had bolted in fear of a first-come first-served basis, by now reaching the mountain's mid-slopes. They were in a fervent rush to find one stone after another, sprinting towards the peak to avoid falling behind. The front-runners amongst this year's new magic department entrants were the well-known pair, Agui and Joseph. It seemed they felt a strange competitive spirit towards each other. Too many. Tanya, slowly crossing through the trees, had already accumulated several magic stones. Just offering magic stones to the altar can't be everything. There must be something in place to differentiate the students further. Without draining her stamina, Tanya ascended the mountain at her own pace, keenly observing her surroundings. Winter mountains are treacherous. Rush and trip, injure oneself, and it's only one's own loss. It's likely something lies in wait further up the mountain. There's no reason to clamber to reach the podium first. It makes sense to maintain a mid-ranking climb, watching carefully for any prepared trials and advancing judiciously. These school uniforms are tight, few. Resting briefly on a nearby rock and gasping for air, Tanya reflected that it's been months since she looked forward to enrolling at Sylvania. As a noblewoman, she always maintained proper conduct, but human desires are endless. Even with constant attention to her figure, ordering a school uniform one size too small had been a moment of imprudence. With no superfluous weight to lose, it felt like excessive ambition. In the end, Tanya took a breather seated on the rock. She never had much faith in her stamina. Although the mountain wasn't particularly high, the myriad branching paths made it easy to lose one's way. Despite this, the general direction towards the peak is unmistakable: simply move upwards along the slope. As a spiderweb of pathways unwinds, it seems everyone has found their own way to navigate through, evidenced by occasional screams echoing from the mid-slope. Clearly, something was prepared beyond the midpoint. Maybe I should head towards the source of that scream. If it's a sign of trouble, I might get a chance to see what's in store. As Tanya sorted her thoughts, a glimpse caught her eye. Far off in the distance, a small figure slumped beneath an old tree. Her dark brown hair and crimson eyes looked uncomfortable together, like oil-repelling water. Pulling down her socks and stroking her sleek legs, it seemed as though she was hurt. Wondering if she was injured, Tanya promptly stood and approached the girl. "Are you hurt?" Like all freshmen, she donned the tidy Sylvania uniform. Her most distinctive feature was her dark brown hair, curling inward around her waist. The sheen alone spoke of careful maintenance. In Sylvania, wealthy children were plentiful enough to be tripping over. Suddenly addressed by Tanya, the girl merely stared blankly back. Though Tanya had ventured to ask out of concern, she received only tepid response. It's as though something was missing, a strange dullness about her. "If you're injured, I'll call for a staff member." "Ah, me. Yes. You're holding up your leg, is it sprained?" "No, it's not that. I just wanted to step on the snow barefoot." What? Tanya had a fleeting intuition: this girl was not of sound mind. There was something off-kilter about her, as if she'd float away like cotton candy in the wind. "There's so much snow. I thought it would feel good to step on it barefoot. Suddenly, right here. Is that not allowed? Is it not normal?" Of course, it's far from normal, but explaining in length seemed futile, so Tanya stayed silent. Without heed, the girl shed her flats and stuck her pale feet into the snow, shivering then moaning with perceived delight. It was as if she'd never felt snow before. "Cold. Well, it's snow. Look at this. My feet got wet." "That's because you burrowed them in snow." Indulging the absurdity with factual retorts, the girl blinked then slowly nodded as if realizing something. He nodded. It was difficult not to first wonder if this person had a mental issue. However, the fact that she was wearing the Sylvania Academy uniform meant she was at least a new student who had proven her abilities. As Tanya stood in bewilderment for a moment, the girl finally realized how she looked and waved her arms. "Ah, this was one of the things on my wish list. Walking through a snowfield barefoot. A wish list. Yes, since I've never been in a position to do such things, I've only ever imagined it while looking at the snow outside the window. It's softer than I thought." Her smiling eyes were divine, a warmth that was seemingly too mature for her age shining through. After saying this, she shook the snow off her red, bare feet, which had quickly turned a stark white just like the falling snowflakes. Tanya cleared her throat and straightened her posture, then closed her eyes and spoke softly in a clear voice. As much as I question the timing of such a carefree introduction during an exam, my name is Tanya, the second daughter of the Rothtailor family. It seems we are classmates. Normally, such an introduction was enough to make most bow their heads deeply. It was Sylvania Academy after all. One might not expect formal deference, but at the very least, no one would make a mistake in front of her. With that, Tanya gave an old-fashioned smile. The modest-looking girl before her should have recognized the name Rothtailor and bowed politely. Tanya somewhat expected that reaction. But what to say? The girl instead clapped her hands happily. The Rothtailor family. She raised her voice with joy, then quickly composed herself when she realized she was too loud. That's right, if you're from the Rothtailor family, I come from a remote region, so, I guess I should show respect, right? So, it's fine. In Sylvania, where all the renowned figures gather, if I'm the only one fussing over such formalities, I'd surely stand out as needlessly fussy. Is that so? Well, yes. This is Sylvania, after all. Her innocent nodding with hands pressed together was endearing. Tanya looked at the girl intently for a moment, then nodded herself. It seemed she had a rough understanding of the situation. Since the girl claimed to come from the borderlands, the social lead was Tanya's to take. I am Kylie Ekner. I come from a small city-state in the eastern Turin Duchy. I've been sheltered and don't know much about the ways of the world. If I ever do something foolish, I apologize in advance. I'm not too familiar with places like this. Tanya, puffing out her chest, spoke with pride and confidence. Don't worry about it. Although I haven't been in Sylvania for long, I arrived early and have already got a feel for the atmosphere. Really, I'm truly clueless. I've tried to learn, but there's only so much I can do. That won't do. Tanya spoke firmly. Crossing her arms dramatically, she lectured as if teaching a lesson. Did you say your name was Kylie? Since we're classmates, may I speak informally? Of course. Quote ellipsis quote. To consider informal speech such a big deal, she spoke as if challenging Tanya to a test with a radiant smile. Tanya couldn't help thinking, what an odd person, but decided to just go with it. Sylvania is full of talented individuals, and also students of such high status that one must not be reckless in dealing with them. If you're not careful, you could end up in big trouble. Why yes, that makes sense. It's not just about making sense. Kylie's carefree attitude did not sit well with Tanya. You're going to wait until you offend someone like a princess or a saintess with your brazen familiarity before you come to your senses. Could that really happen? To be exact, even someone like me, no, let's just leave it there. Tanya felt uneasy even as she stood there, finding it hard to believe that Kylie would respond so casually despite knowing she was in the presence of a Rothtailor. Remember, even though scholastic virtue always comes first in Sylvania, there are those of such high birth that they could break even those unspoken rules. Don't let your guard down. If something happens, it'll be you who suffers. I see, I'll keep that in mind. You're concerned for me, aren't you? See concern, you say. Tanya felt rather exasperated looking at Kylie maintaining a relaxed attitude even after such a frank warning. Miss Tanya is truly kind. To worry and give sincere advice to someone you just met like me. Stop it, you're making me blush. Anyway, we shouldn't be talking here, we need to get back to the exam. That's right, it's in the middle of the exam. More of the same response, again and again. Tanya had met many bold people before, but never someone with such a complete lack of tension. She sighed heavily after a moment of introspection. I'm not too concerned about getting high grades, it would just draw unnecessary attention to get into a class like A. What does it matter if you stand out, and if you aren't ambitious about learning, why even come to Sylvania? Sure, I am ambitious about learning, but doesn't it seem more diligent to start from the bottom and work my way up? If you think so, there's not much more I can say. Tanya felt like a deep sigh could cause the earth itself to cave in. She started to think it was time to go about her business. I don't think that way, I need to make it to the top. Yeah, Kylie nodded vigorously and then suddenly grasped Tanya's hand. Then I'll join you. Huh, I thought you weren't too bothered about exams. Well, that's true, but... Kylie hesitated, then confessed as if forcing out a secret. It's my first time making a friend my age. Quote. Truly, given her actions, it wasn't surprising she didn't have friends. Tanya had to forcefully restrain herself from making a harsh retort. I might not be interested in the exams, but I'll help you with yours, Miss Tanya. Quote. Maybe that way, our relationship can become special and stronger, you see. How socially inept could one be to make such an effort for a single friend? Just the thought was giving Tanya a headache. She stared hard at Kylie for a long time. Did Kylie behave so comfortably even knowing she stood before a Rothtailor lady? A reminder of the difference in status seemed necessary, but Tanya found herself unable to solidify her resolve due to the strangely malleable atmosphere. She felt it pitiful and considered showing some undeserved kindness. Kylie was a peculiar person. The semester placement exam had clear content and a definitive time limit. The faster conclusion desired by Assistant Professor Claire was perhaps the main reason, but this was of no concern to the students. Almost an hour into the exam, yet near the summit altar, there were no students in sight. Clevius swallowed nervously, perhaps he would end up just standing guard and returning without incident. Clutching at that small hope. Ah, I thought I was a goner. I've made it. Bursting through the midway barrier of enchanted equipment on the mountain, the first freshman reached the entrance of the altar. A young boy with a short blush of red in his hair, glasses perched on his small nose, and a stature that was short even for a male. The heir to the Rokan mercenaries, Agui. He had the capacity to rank high among the first-year magic division, despite his appearance. Just die. Cough, cough. In panic, Clevius grabbed his sheathed sword and swung it wildly, knocking Agui down with a sound like a pig being butchered. Having just escaped the phantoms, Agui was unprepared for the assault. Ah, ha, ha. Agui wasn't aiming for a vital hit, but for a freshman worn out from battling illusions, any hit was overwhelming. As Agui lay unconscious, Clevius caught his breath in terror. Damn, why suddenly appear like that? Really, ha, ha. A tragic situation, indeed. Agui's only fault was being there. It's easier than I expected. Clevius wondered if he could simply ambush all the students that made it up and subdue them. Unfair to the students, certainly, but perhaps he could claim it tested their adaptive response in crisis. Admittance to Sylvania's A division was no trivial matter after all. Anyone intending to join, even if only a prospective second-year member, should reasonably be able to handle such a challenge. With that self-victory, Clevius clenched his fists. This might be cowardly, shameful and unworthy for a senior. But what can you do? Let's keep going. Boom. Yet, as if defying Clevius's hopes, an explosive noise erupted from the altar's north entrance. The north entrance, which Anise was guarding, had been breached. Chapter 80, New Student Class Assignment Test 4. Joseph Whitepelts, the youngest researcher to receive a position at the Tog Magic Association supported by the Wongsung Group. Although talented enough not to need basic magic education all the way in Sylvania, his choice to come for a diploma shows just how pragmatic he is. He's conducting magic research only because it's profitable, not because there's any scholarly nobility in it. Joseph is the younger brother of Dorothy Whitepelts, the top-ranking student in the alchemy department among the prospective fourth-year students. Unlike his pitiable sister, he has a quiet and polite personality, but conversely, the magic he researches is without exception bombastic. He's just a freshman, yet he knows how to handle intermediate magic, 3 to be exact. The intermediate fire magic, point explosion, the intermediate ice magic, ice spear, and the intermediate earth magic, earth shatter. He is a mage that absolutely cannot be considered at a freshman level. There is a reason he was the first to pass the trial of illusion magic. Aiming for the top rank in the magic department is a reasonable goal, and if he could surpass Wade Callamore of the combat department, he could even aim for the top of his entire grade. His head is covered with messy hair due to his nature of finding haircuts bothersome. He maintains a back-swept fringe with a thin hairband, but the back of his hair is close to being disheveled. Go ahead, pass by. The remnants of the explosion linger around the entrance to the altar. Anise looked down quietly below them. The contest between mages is quick to conclude. More than anything, when you become a mage of Joseph's caliber, you can quickly estimate the level of your opponent. It's not even a contest to begin with. Anise is a chief teaching assistant and could even be called a specialist in practical and academic fields, but her skill in combat magic is only slightly above average for prospective third-year students. Certainly not a level that regular freshmen could contend with. It's just that Joseph is extraordinary. There's no need to feel so resentful. That name of yours. Anise Halen. Yes, Senior Anise. With a polite voice, Joseph picked up the magic stone. Beyond Anise, the large altar's pillar was visible. All he needed to do was to approach and offer the magic stone on the altar, and his test would be over. Joseph felt the ordeal was anticlimactic. The time invested in the actual trial was less than the time spent on the trek up here. You must surely have your own specialized field, Senior. Just because it wasn't suitable for combat, there must be a field that is uniquely yours, which I dare not compare to. You're quite mistaken. Anise cut off Joseph's words, her head still lowered. Yes, I'm frustrated, but not in the way you think. Just like you said, Joseph, I have my specialized field. Then, don't pry into it, and if you're going to pass by, do it quickly. I have to save my energy as I must deal with students who will be coming up after you. Joseph glanced up slightly, looking at Anise's expression. Indeed, it wasn't the face of someone who had been crushed by the disparity in ability. It's true, as one becomes a senior in the third year, you have a certain tenacity. Joseph shook his head and passed by Anise nonchalantly. After Joseph left, Anise slowly sat down on a nearby rock. Then she wiped her eyes thoroughly. It was indubitably humiliating. However, her vexation was subtly different from what Joseph pointed out. The foundation that allowed Anise to endure the lengthy and wintry academic life was the perfection in her work. She never spoiled her tasks due to trivial and petty mistakes. She had been able to affirm herself incessantly amidst the grueling academic life because she lived every aspect of it cleanly and perfectly. The reason for Anise's frustration was due to her incompetence. She damaged a magic engineering device, panicked at an uncommon mistake without saying anything, failed to present any alternatives, and in the end, she didn't even manage to block the entrance to the north altar. Her perfectionism had become a double-edged sword, stabbing her own heart with an icy blade. Always pretending to be flawless, perfect, and without gaps, but to slip up at a crucial moment was the pathetic state of being Anise found herself in. The realization that she was still far from perfection despite fiercely struggling for it was frustrating. Anise sat on the rock, sniffling, and looked up toward the altar at the summit. A blonde boy would be guarding the final altar. Anise, who rarely made mistakes, caused all sorts of major accidents, but still, she tried to address everything with quick thinking. One would expect anger, but instead, she tried to lead the conversation in a constructive direction. She was struck by the thought of that face. Her heart was clueless. Anise sat at the entrance to the altar, quietly soothing her own chest. The first visitor. Entering the altar, Joseph exhaled deeply. As expected, the test wasn't over yet. There was a boy sitting on the altar. The boy's noble-like appearance, with his short dazzling blonde forelocks rounded up, left no doubt of his aristocratic lineage. His sharp eyes were staring directly at Joseph, but the way he sat casually on the altar also looked quite relaxed. And I hope you would be the last visitor. The test procedure is straightforward, which is nice. Joseph quickly assessed the surroundings. About half a dozen magic engineering devices lay scattered around the altar. They appeared to be improved versions of the illusion discs he had seen on the way up. However, the parts were strewn all over as if someone had hastily tinkered with them. These high-quality devices couldn't be fixed easily. If it's beyond simple function adjustment, they're so sophisticated that one couldn't even attempt to meddle with them without considerable magic engineering knowledge. Furthermore, several trees grown near the altar bore marks of being cut, and a fairly large leather pouch was placed on the altar. The pouch seemed to contain magic stones, judging by the energy it emitted. He didn't expect such valuable items to be piled up like that. One possible inference was that the entire battle scene had already been adjusted by that boy. Carelessness was forbidden. You know the content of the test, right? All you need to do is offer those magic stones you brought to the altar. But of course, I won't be standing by idly. Indeed, the test method is curious. Joseph stroked his chin and pondered before speaking out. If I manage to overpower you, senior, and succeed in offering the magic stones, who will the students following me have the test with? Well, that's not for you to worry about. That is true. I suppose all alternatives will already be arranged. Saying so, Joseph focused his eyes on the situation in front of him. He did not know the blonde boy's name. However, through the color of the badge and his uniform, he deduced, just as Anise whom he had faced on his way up, that the boy was a member of the magic department. As mentioned before, a mage can quickly evaluate each other's capacity. Although it's not 100% accurate, a rough estimate can still be made. Joseph did not feel any overwhelming magic power emanating from Ed. Instead, Ed was relying on the power of the magic stones on the altar. If relying on magic stones were enough to overpower any strong mage, then who would work hard to study magic? Magic is just fuel after all. No matter how much power one could grasp at the moment, if one's inherent magical power is low, it means that the level of magic that person can handle is exceptionally low. A person's total magical power level is bound to increase to some extent as they train in magic. The majority of the magical power that Joseph felt from the blonde boy depended on the magic stones, with almost none of it being his innate power. That means, he had hardly trained in magic at all. Despite being in the magic department. It's a little pitiful to face such an opponent, Joseph sighed deeply. Still, he couldn't take his senior lightly. It would be best to use intermediate magic and wrap up quickly. He's starting to feel hungry. Let's finish this quickly and go buy a sandwich. With that thought, Joseph raised his palm in midair. After a brief moment of concentration, he clenched his fist and stared in the direction of the blonde boy. Intermediate fire magic, point explosion. Of the various spells in combat magic studies, it's a notorious spell for being unforgivable if unknown. The casting itself isn't quick, and it requires quite a bit of focus, but once the casting is successful, it's almost impossible to deal with. Because it can cause a sudden explosion of magical power at a desired point that the caster can handle, to counter point explosion, one must move in advance. This slight hand gesture alone allows the opponent to perceive the intent, read the flow of magic, and perform a series of evasion maneuvers to escape the blast zone at the set point. Once the explosion point is selected, it cannot be easily moved. If it can be read, it's possible to deal with it to some extent, but reading it is not simple. While one may struggle with the lack of combat magic experience, Ed Rothtaylor swiftly lowered his stance and rolled his body away. Boom. The explosion was activated quickly, so the scale was not as large as anticipated. Point explosion had good versatility but terrible magic efficiency. It could suppress the opponent with firepower but was rarely fatal. With the ability to use high-level magic, perhaps one could cause an explosion powerful enough to bring down a building, but Joseph's level wasn't there yet. Ed, who had swiftly rolled out of the blast zone, gathered magical power in his hand. Joseph watched the magical energy and deduced one attribute that Ed was handling. Fire magic. In the battle between elemental magicians, it's crucial to identify which element the opponent is using. Joseph quickly drew defensive magic power, considering all the possibilities. At that level of power, it could be either ignition or scorch. If it were ignition, flames would spread along the ground. If it were scorch, it would spew out in a radiant form. Whatever it was, Joseph's defensive magic could not be breached. Joseph quickly positioned himself and manifested the magic circle. Ed's ignition spell spread along the ground towards Joseph, but the flaming fire only encircled Joseph without reaching him with its heat. The size of the flame is larger than expected. He's diligently trained at least one basic magic. He could also utilize intermediate magic. Joseph completely reversed his evaluation of his opponent. Having spent a long time researching at Tog Academy, he could gauge the overall magic ability just by the level of basic magic. Why his inherent magical power was so low was beside the point at the moment. But, he doesn't seem to have much experience in magic combat. Ed's ignition spell continued to burn against Joseph's defense. However, it's difficult to compensate for the difference in expertise. Ed's flames can't breach Joseph's defense, they were just wasting magic. An experienced mage wouldn't waste magic in this way, instead, they would look for other options. Even if precious magic stones are piled up, the magnitude of ignition magic consumed more. Before the amount of magic, fatigue would knock him down first. The flames would die out before long. As Joseph thought this, a voice seeped in from beyond the barrier. Joseph Whitepelts. Somehow knowing his name, the opponent called out Joseph's name precisely. The flames disappeared, and the figure of Ed Rothtailor appeared in front of him. The fire was not an offensive tool. It was a smokescreen to obscure vision. The moment he realized this, Ed Rothtailor's right foot was already peering through the defensive magic. Defensive magic circles excellently block magic power, but if a body is pressed between the intertwined magic circles, they have no choice but to be pierced. To defend against physical attacks, different types of magic circles must be manifested. With a swift kick to the gut, Joseph was thrust away, making a retching sound. The magic stone that Joseph was holding in his left hand rolled on the ground. Do you think just because you're a mage, you will always only face mages? As Ed went to pick up the magic stone, rapid psychokinetic magic pulled the stone towards Joseph. He pulled it towards him. Whisk. With just enough time to grab the mana stone, Joseph rose from the corner, clutching his stomach. Since he was hardly trained physically, the shock lingered for quite a while. Hugh. Gasping for breath, Joseph finally managed to support himself. And at last, he grasped the situation. It was the Sylvania Academy, the continent's premier institution. Shaking his head several times, Joseph now understood the intent. A mage fundamentally trains for combat, assuming a magic duel since it's the most profound and difficult. However, one cannot always assume that real combat situations will be strictly magical duels. Real battles are dirty free-for-alls. Fights that proceed as purely magical power clashes, as described in textbooks, are rare. Joseph once again reflected on his greatest weakness, practical combat experience. I won't let my guard down, senior. Joseph's gaze was icy. Despite having difficulty breathing from being kicked too hard, he had not sustained any serious impact on the outcome of the battle. What was clear was that although his opponent was a mage, they were not fighting like one. When Anise, as a mage, fell short in skill and accepted defeat according to convention, it was completely different. Was even placing Anise in front meant to induce complacency? Magic once again gathered in Ed's hand. Of course, Joseph wouldn't just stand still. Fire magic again. Joseph was skilled in 3 elements: fire, ice, and earth. He planned to erect a basic ice magic barrier, ice wall. Although it would obstruct visibility again, unlike before, it wouldn't be so easily penetrated since it was a physical barrier. No, even this could be intentional. He halted that thought, correcting himself quickly. When ice meets fire, melting occurs, and steam rises. Ultimately, the goal of obscuring visibility would be achieved. In magical skill, Joseph was superior. There was no reason to offer the opponent any variables to work with. The range of ignition was too broad to be covered by earth magic. Therefore, the only option was to fight stronger fire with fire. Not even Ed Rothtailor, moving swiftly, could pass through fire. Strength must counter strength. If one's skill is superior, it's advantageous to simplify the fight. In an instant, Joseph's hands, casting, scorching burst, erupted with a flame of incredible scale. The radiating blaze was so extensive it could cover half of the clearing in front of the altar. It wasn't something that could be dodged. Just when Joseph felt certain of victory, Ed Rothtailor sprung out, from the fire. He moved quickly, with only parts of his clothing singed. However, it's insane to think he penetrated the flames head-on. He'd have to endure severe burns. Yet aside from some burnt clothing, Ed's hair wasn't singed in the slightest. Fire resistance. Whoosh. Suddenly, the wind blew away all the flames Joseph had conjured. Ed Rothtailor was already at close quarters. Close combat. Joseph was confident in his magical casting speed. Defend against a physical attack. Or a magical one. In this dichotomy, Joseph barely chose correctly. Insight. The physical defense magic manifested in an instant. Ed's thrust with the dagger he had drawn from his leather thigh sheath was blocked. Joseph's eyes widened at the sight of the blade. Crazy. Where did he pull that out from? He probably didn't intend to really stab, but a shiver ran down his spine. It was the terror induced by the harshness of actual combat. Joseph swallowed dryly. But having defended against the physical attack, the victory from here on was essentially Joseph's to claim. Since physical attacks between them were blocked, the contest would be who could cast spells faster. There was no way Joseph would be outdone in spell casting speed. Thinking this, a massive explosion engulfed Joseph. Boom. Cough. Hew. Joseph, with nearly superhuman willpower, did not let go of the mana stone. Clutching it, he was again flung across the clearing. As long as the mana stone wasn't taken, he was still okay. Huff, huff. Ed's chilling gaze locked onto Joseph's mana stone from the center of the clearing. Holding back his trembling right hand, Joseph managed to support himself. Real combat. The weight of the two words, real combat, hangs heavily on Joseph, who learned battle magic only in the safety of the Magic Society's laboratories, following the textbook and practice sparring. There are no safety measures. No judges to score and decide the victor and the loser. Because this is not a duel, anyone could see that the exchanges between Ed and Joseph were actual combat itself. The opponent doesn't simply challenge with pure magic in a formal manner. They use every cunning trick and dirty stratagem with the sole purpose of overpowering their opponent. Don't lose focus. Keep thinking. Next, it's uncertain what move the opponent will make. The stage is one where there is no such thing as cheating, anything goes. To earn the title of Class A, one must be able to adapt like this. Reminded of that fact, Joseph took a steady breath. Even so, there's no way his basic magic casting speed can exceed mine. That must be a magic circle etched in advance, or a magic array bestowed. It's a compression of the magic casting process. Joseph started to think fast. His brilliant mind was no joke. Considering that he had pierced through the flames bodily, it was strange. He didn't seem to be equipped with flame-resistant gear. Joseph's vast magical knowledge pointed to one place. Spirit art. Joseph returned to a defensive stance. Ed too did not immediately move. A lull in the battle. Contracted spirits often grant their contractors perpetual magic, which they usually call blessings. The blessing of fire cloak is a common grant from lesser fire spirits. It temporarily increases one's resistance to flames, a perpetual magic that seemed most likely. Moreover, it explained how Ed had set off an explosive spell faster than Joseph. It's not a magic array, it's a spirit array. Whether it be the magics being manipulated, the equipment, or the strategy, all were crafted to strike at the opponent's weakness and overcome the enemy. The blonde noble with half-burnt clothes, staring down coldly at Joseph, could not be strictly defined as a mage, he simply used magic. Just a human well-versed in combat itself, making up for any gap in specs with tricks, utterly focused on practical experience. Joseph wasn't exceptionally sensitive to spirits, but when focused, he could vaguely see the outlines of lower spirits. Concentrating his magic on his brows and looking intently, he finally spotted the figure of a flame bat floating behind Ed. He has been cunningly mixing fire magic to hide the use of spirit arts. On reflection, there must be more than just that hidden chess piece. The surroundings. Severed branches, magical engineering equipment rolling on the floor, Joseph notices these. There's also a high likelihood he's concealing something technical. Can he respond to everything? Joseph was realistic. He swiftly shook his head and revised his strategy. I admit defeat. Here, I return the mana stone to you. Saying that, Joseph slid the mana stone on the ground. Ed's gaze was drawn momentarily to the stone. It was a quick-witted move by Joseph. Surely he couldn't ignore the stone from that distance, given that Ed's goal was to take it. During the brief moment Ed was distracted, Joseph conjured, Ice Spear, with unmatched casting speed. Quick casting reduces the magic's power. However, it doesn't matter. It's just a second decoy to attract Ed's attention. Ed would surely anticipate this far. To win in actual combat, one must strike at the opponent's vulnerabilities. Joseph was a pure mage who studied magical arts in a secluded room. And now, pushed to the corner's corner, Joseph leapt with the ice spear. Ooh-ah! His trembling fist ripped through the air towards Ed's jaw. Distracted by the ice spear, Ed quickly ducked, and Joseph's straight punch landed squarely on his cheek. Thump! Ed's head snapped to the side. But that was all. It was obvious considering their weight difference, he neither crumbled nor was thrown. Just the head turned. Even Ed had probably not expected Joseph, who spent a lifetime studying magic, to resort to punching in such desperation. With the punch still lodged, Ed's head swung back upright, the chilly gaze intact. They were at point-blank range. A punch could instantly make contact. Joseph gulped down air as if it were his last. His last shreds of pride held back tears. As Ed raised his hand to grab Joseph's wrist, a wind from an unknown origin swept through. Whoosh! It wasn't magic Ed had conjured. Rather, the perpetual magic, usually protecting Ed's body, the so-called blessing of the spirit. There's no rule saying one can only contract with a single spirit. Obviously, Joseph was propelled by the mystic wind, crashing into a corner of the clearing. Cough! Hew! And he barely managed to draw breath once more. The dilation of his pupils was at its limit. If Ed himself hadn't consciously activated it, then it must indeed be a spirit's blessing. Joseph knew all about spirit blessings. Once in a while, when an unexpected hit comes in, the magic that sweeps the enemy away with wind to subdue them, blessing of the tempest. The response was slow, probably because the contract was recent. But it had certainly activated. The spirit providing that blessing is, to Joseph's knowledge, unique. Joseph trembled as he looked at the top of the altar steel. Considering the wind that had earlier blown away Joseph's flames wasn't conjured by Ed himself, but rather originated from the high steel's peak. Joseph couldn't see it with his sensitivity, but something was undoubtedly there, embracing the giant steel, sitting astride. If Joseph's predictions were correct, then what else, and how much more, had been concealed? Did that mean until now, it had only been a light skirmish? Because there were many more freshmen to face. If I manage to overcome you, senior, and present the mana stone, with whom will the following students test themselves? How arrogant had he been, tossing those thoughtless words around. Swish! Ed, who had drawn his dagger, stood upright once more. Joseph nearly felt like glints of light poured from Ed's unsteady gaze. Startled, Joseph shouted, "I truly admit defeat." And then, he rapidly conjured the point burst spell to destroy his own mana stone lying on the ground. It was the simplest declaration of surrender. After a moment observing the shattered mana stone, now just debris, Ed relaxed his shoulders. A moment of silence. Right, you did well. Ed, as if implying the entire battle was nothing much, put away the dagger. Joseph stood in shock. You made an excellent decision at the end. A decent one, indeed. You got me. Now go. With that, he dusted off his scorched uniform and sat down again on the altar. Joseph slowly got up from his place and opened his mouth quietly. Senior, what is your name, please? Ed Rothtaylor. Ed dusted off his sleeve and quietly sat on the altar, waiting for the next challenger. Looking at Ed sitting on the altar just as he did when Joseph first entered, he couldn't help but click his tongue in astonishment. One thing was certain, that man hadn't even used half of what he was capable of yet.